Call a meeting to order, regular meeting agenda, Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024, 5:30 PM, 8 PM, City Council Chambers. All rise for a pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moment of silence, please. Thank you. You may be seated. Mr. Secretary, roll call, please.
Honorable Mayor Dr. Victor D. Trevino,
Present.
Council Member District 1 Gilbert Gonzalez, Council Member District 2 Ricardo Rangel Jr., Council Member District 3 Melissa Cigarroa, Council Member District 4 Alberto Torres Jr.,
Here,
Mayor Pro Tem Ruben Gutierrez Jr.,
Present.
Council Member District 6 Dr. Tyler King, Council Member District 7 Vanessa Perez, Council Member District 8 Alisa Cigarroa. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes. August
so moved.
Motion, second. This is for August the 5th, 2024, August the 7th, 2024, August the 8th, 2024, August the 9th, 2024, August 19th, 2024, and August 27th, 2024. Motion, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Motion to approve appointments, Mayor, to commissions, boards, and committees.
We have citizen comments.
Motion, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Citizen comments, Mayor.
Two citizen comments.
This was for an item. That was the general.
All right. We have Irma del Barrio.
Good evening. May I start? Good evening. I'm here because I became aware that we have
Name and title, please, for the record. Your name for the record.
Irma del Barrio,
Thank you.
that we have 18 days to get an animal out of a shelter or he will be euthanized. I cannot believe this. I have fosters right now, 2 of them. As soon as they're transported somewhere else, I'll get 1, 2, or 3. We, as Pets Alive, work very hard to find rescues for these animals. They come to us abused, hurt, scared, abandoned, and we socialize them. We make them well at our expense. We also try and work with the community and with you council members. I know that we're doing now vacuna clinics. We had a very successful one a week ago, last week, or 2 weeks ago at Fasken. A lot of people showed up. And what I know about rescues is that this 18-day deadline is unheard of. It's archaic. We need to be proactive, not hand down death sentences. I know we can't save all dogs, but we can save some of them. And I just think that it's time to look at other means, whether it be spay and neutering. I know we did microchips with Lauren from the animal shelter. She's been very helpful with us. We are partners, and along with other nonprofit. As it is, we're tied down by facilities. We don't have a place. I foster at my house, at other fosters' house. Every money we get is given to us. And now we try we get them homes as fast as we can. We already know that we have a deadline. But now this 18-day deadline is just, I don't understand it. We can't work any faster. We can't do anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are items. All right. Mr. Secretary, I'd like to move my items 71, 2, and 3 forward, please.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 70A. Request by Mayor Dr. Victor Trevino, presentation and recognition of Laredo Crime Stoppers and Laredo Police Department on their ongoing collaboration with preventing recent crimes and keeping us one of the safest cities in the United States and any matters related thereto. I wanted to bring this item up because it's on the agenda, because sometimes we take it for granted that we're one of the safest cities in the United States. But this is not free, and it comes at a great cost. And this is due to incredible collaboration and volunteer organizations, which includes Crime Stoppers. This is an organization that I met with last week, and through their efforts, we're able to avoid potential serious crime in our community. So before I recognize this great organization, I would like to call Chief and them to up here to talk about what they do and to remember how important it is for us to keep this organization funded, because they actually do to prevent this serious crimes from occurring.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Claudia Luis. I'm the Executive Director for Laredo Crime Stoppers. I'm here with the Laredo Crime Stoppers Board and the Chief of Police and the former Assistant Chief of Police, who's now part of our advisory board. Through continuous efforts, we've been able to be successful. It came to our attention that we may have been defunded through third-party funding. And so I think we've seen each other a couple of times, and I think I've met with everybody individually where I've requested and I've asked for more support. The Laredo Police Department has a lot of support that they provide to the organization. They currently have a lieutenant and a captain who are helping us with the investigation component, but when it comes to outreach and education, that takes from our volunteer efforts and from the individuals that are here. And so we met with the mayor and we discussed some of those fabulous numbers that we wouldn't be able to achieve if it wasn't for the support of the Chief of Police and the entire police department, in addition with all the collaborations with all the law enforcement agencies.
Chief Miguel Rodriguez, for the record, I do want to say that, this organization is one of the organizations that completely not only helps, but also creates that public awareness and that public education when it comes to make sure that you come forward with any information that would help the police department to make the city safe. But more than anything is the fact that the management part of making sure that the people that are bringing this information forth, that they remain anonymous, that making sure that the information gets pushed to the right departments, and all that is also in conjunction with our lieutenants and our captains that are in charge of making this program a success. And we also have to bring forth the fact that some of these tips that come in, sometimes they don't even want the payment. They just want to make sure that they provide this information, right? And we move forward with this information as fast as we can. But how many tips do we get per month? There's some statistics.
It's
So based off of last year, we came back from the state conference with the top productivity, which meant that overall the state, Laredo, Texas, produced the most tips. We received over 900 tips. We paid out over $28,000 to 33 tipsters, and some of those did not come forward to ask for that money. And over $500,000 was seized in property and seizures that were recovered.
Yeah, and again, when we talk about Crime Stoppers, we're thinking, drugs and firearms and things like that. But just recently, we received a tip through Crime Stoppers, and that's what got us involved in stopping a threat to life at one of our local schools. So it does a lot. The system works really well, and this is the reason why we continue supporting it. And we do have a legend there that continues to support that because when he was an assistant chief, he was a big advocate for Crime Stoppers. And Chief, you want to say a few words about it?
For the record, I'm Jesus Torres, retired Assistant Chief of Police. I spent 38 years in the police department from the ranks up. And I'm a huge advocate for Laredo Crime Stoppers. When Laredo Police Department was the host of the Laredo Crime Stoppers, it was a great honor for LPD and Laredo Crime Stoppers to join efforts. And we just need to remind people out there that the Crime Stoppers are a band of citizens that volunteer their time to assist the local law enforcement agencies to do and reduce and detect crime in Laredo. Quick history. Back in 1735, Sir Robert Peel, who was the founder of the first Metropolitan Police Department in London, he did say this, that every police officer is a member of the community they reside in, but they get paid to do the job of every citizen, because every citizen is incumbent with responsibility to report, detect suspicious activity, and then report it to the police department, who are actually members of the community. That is reflected today. So Laredo Crime Stoppers and Colleen is the tip of the spear, I'm going to say, because we have gathered recognition around the state. Remember that Crime Stoppers is an international organization. Laredo we actually have the banner of Laredo Crime Stoppers because the Laredo Police Department and other law enforcement agencies continue to support shoulder to shoulder with us. I'm an advisory board after I retired 4 years ago, so I'm glad and honored and privileged to be part of this organization still. Thank you very much.
Mayor,
Thank you.
May I say a few words?
Yes, go ahead.
Mayor, I want to take this advantage of this opportunity because I don't know if council knows this or whoever's watching at home, but when they say the Laredo Police Department is the host law enforcement agency of the organization, it means that the tips that they get filtered directly through the Laredo Police Department. Years ago, it used to be under the sheriff's office, and you sometimes have that struggle between law enforcement agencies because they want to be the host agency so that they get first dibs, right, as to what these tips are. And a lot of the times, they want to be the host agency because if there's tips that involve seizure of monies, well, guess what? That law enforcement agency gets through forfeiture funding, keep those monies, which then the chief of the respective agency has discretion, right, to utilize to fight, crime in the community. We help Crime Stoppers and other very gracious with an office, which is in District 4, the district I represent. And I know their MOU is coming up very soon. And it is what used to be a former police substation, which then was the office for TABC. When TABC vacated, we saw the opportunity to give them this office space so that they wouldn't have the overhead expense. Then we were able to bring their funding up. Colleen is correct. They were at zero. Based on a committee recommendation, this council was very generous and gracious with your work that we were able to give you all, I think, the same amount as last year, whatever amount was requested. However, I do want to take this opportunity to ask our city manager to review the MOU they have so that they can have an extension so that they can continue operating out of the office that they currently have, number one. And number two, I've always asked all the chiefs of police to consider this, and I'm going to ask you, Chief, as well, that whenever a tip comes in that it involves seizure, that we remember Crime Stoppers, right? Because if it wouldn't be for that tip, the seizure of monies could essentially not happen, right? And sometimes they depend from those monies to be able to pay the tipsters, right? And times are tough. I know that they're going through a very difficult year. And it would help that if you were to apply your discretion and you see it fit, that maybe assisting them to pay the tips, right? Or assisting them for even operations, that it would help, right? And I understand that not all tips involve seizure of monies, but when they do, I think that that would be the ideal scenario that Crime Stoppers would want in order to continue working diligently with the police department, because it does take resources, as we know, right, to do the job and do it right. And I admire the job they do because they're doing the job and they're doing it right with very little, right? And I know that Colleen is the one that goes through all the sacrifice most of the time, and they're very lucky to have her as well. But Chief, if you would consider that, I think it'd be good. You're the only one that can determine that discretion, as federal law allows it, right, and even state law. We can't tell you what to do with the funding, but I think it'd be a very good way of investing forfeiture monies back into the organization that indeed got those monies for the law enforcement agency.
Absolutely, Councilman Torres, and I do want to say that, you know, we can look at different items that we can assist them with, and, you know, me and Colleen, you know, we talk, and we can definitely get something going in regards to that.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. What would you hold down? I'm gonna provide some recognitions.
Mayor, may
Go ahead.
I'm very grateful to see Laredo Crime Stoppers here. I think in 2022, council did recognize them because they received the greatest dollar productivity, greatest dollar recovery award in the state of Texas at that conference in 2023. They received a top productivity award at their annual conference for the state of Texas. And those efforts really contribute, as Chief was saying, to the safety of the city. So I want to highlight Councilmember Torres's comments, because I do think it's not just that we believe as a city in what Crime Stoppers does, and we've seen the results of that work. They've also been recognized at the state level, and very prestigious honor. So thank you so much for your efforts, and I'm glad to see this collaboration will continue.
Thank you.
Let's take that picture.
All right. All right, if you all wanna come over here so we can get a picture and a recognition.
Congratulations, Legend. Legend, pleasure to see you again. Fantastic.
That's what we call it, the requirement.
There you, oh, is that right? That's legend, there you go.
All right, certificate of recognition. Mayor and City Council hereby recognizes Laredo Crime Stoppers in recognition of your ongoing collaboration with the Laredo Police Department in preventing recent crimes and keeping us one of the safest cities in the United States. Congratulations.
One picture here. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect. One more here.
3, 2.
Thank you.
One more.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Certificate of recognition. The Mayor and City Council hereby recognizes Laredo Police Department in recognition of your outstanding collaboration with the Laredo Crime Stoppers in preventing recent crime and keeping us one of the safest cities in the United States. Congratulations to Laredo Police Department.
Picture here. 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Great. Congratulations. Thank you, guys. Congratulations, Chief. Congratulations. As always. Congrats, man. Great seeing you. Absolutely. Congratulations. Great job, guys. You all did an awesome, phenomenal job.
Myself there.
Congratulations. Great job.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you.
Congratulations, ma'am. Great seeing you.
Robert's the last wife, right?
Oh, yes. When I first came in, oh, he didn't have to.
He's a nice guy. He's just expensive advertising. Mayor, briefly, before you continue with the item, I'm getting text messages from constituents that they can't access the broadcast. Obviously, we're not in violation of any TOMA because we're recording, but just so we'll know, right, I guess the weather.
Yeah, Mayor and City Council, yeah, we've lost the ability to have the signal go out to everybody's home through our internet. And so until the weather gets better.
That we're having the issue, other cities are also having the issue, but we're live on Spectrum and we're recording it.
Okay, good. Some people can see it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on number 70A2. Discussion with possible action on the creation of a walk of fame to recognize Laredo's that have represented and shown an exemplary life of contributing to the community and any matters related thereto. Now, this item was placed on the agenda because as a society, and even here in our community, there are too many of us that don't highlight our own history and more of our own talent. And as mayor, I generally think it is a good idea to recognize accomplishments, incredibly talented and giving people within our community. It serves as a marker for our youth to be motivated to succeed. Unfortunately, we can't be naming every building or street after these deserving people. So it is a great way and a more economical way to get this accomplished. Interestingly enough, I meet with constituents every day in my office, and most of the time I hear about something that the city might not be doing right. But as mayor, I do try to help them or explain why it's done a certain way. This is part of the job to always improve. But it was always nice, a nice change to hear a great idea. So I want to thank Mr. Gomez, who took the time and came to my office and brought this idea forth. So this is my motion. Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Discussion, Mayor.
Discussion. Go ahead.
Mayor, is there a department that is going to handle the location of the Walk of Fame? Where will this effort exist?
Mr. Gomez, or, come up here, please.
Honorable Mayor, City Council folks, my name is Hector Gomez. I'm a retired school administrator and a current business owner. And I have this idea that would beautify the downtown area and bring more people to the downtown area. Now, I conceived this idea some years ago, and this is what we call the Walk of Fame sidewalk. It'll be a sidewalk in the downtown area, hopefully in an area where it's heavily trafficked. This would be a sidewalk to honor Laredoans who have brought fame to Laredo by their accomplishments. This could be a sidewalk with a plaque honoring these distinguished individuals. And I have a list of about 18 individuals here, but this is not a finite list. This can, we can be adding names to the sidewalk, in the future for other well-known Laredoans. And I thought about, for example, the Canizales brothers. These are world boxing champions. Jennifer La Traviesa Lozano, our first Olympian. Rene, musicians, with their famous song Angelito. I think they made it to American Bandstand, and they presented the city of Laredo, and they were in a band. Joe Arciniega, who was a member of the National Board of Directors for the Alzheimer's Association. Federico Peña, he was the former mayor of Denver, Colorado. Our former mayor, Saul Ramirez, who at one time, or still is, the director of the Housing and Urban Development. Amado Peña, a local artist. I believe he lives in New Mexico now, but he's a Laredo-born artist. And Armando Hinojosa, artist, sculptor. And the state capitol statues were made by Mr. Hinojosa. And then we have recent ones like Iman Esfandi, who's an actor. Julia Vera, actress. Jovite Dar, who had a quarter made in her honor. And you know the Jovita Idar Park over there by the base. Again, these are very deserving Laredoans. And Beto Ramon, he's a band member who wrote songs for numerous well-known singers that their songs can be heard on the radio very frequently. Our own Freddy Benavides, the major league player. He used to be in the Reds organization. Caleb Canales, a coach in the NBA. And I believe there's another coach coaching somewhere, but I don't recall his name. And then we have a recent honoree by the Laredo Morning Times, Arturo Elizondo and Dr. Trevino. Mr. Elizondo is working on a protein to hopefully eliminate hunger in the world. We have Peter Estudillo, singer and songwriter, who played with Selena Quintanilla, and he has his own band. Our own Dan Firova, coach of the Astros, and Arturo Campos, a Laredoan who worked with NASA and was recognized with the Presidential Medal of Freedom in honor of his life-saving efforts. And like I said, this is not a fine-dine list. You know, we can keep on adding. Hopefully a committee can be drawn up and look at deserving individuals. You know, it doesn't have to be, it'd be a committee effort. And if you have any questions, like I said, in the downtown area, where maybe it could be at the Aldo Titangelo walkway or any other walkway. You don't have to make a new sidewalk, but you could even modify it and put the plaque there, much like the ones in Las Vegas, much like the ones in Hollywood. It's a walk of fame to honor these deserving Laredoans living and non-living folks. And I guess the idea is these people would take their relatives whenever they come to visit to the downtown area. And hopefully from there, they can go on and view the other shops that we have there, the outlet malls and what have you. But the idea is to bring people to the downtown area. Any questions?
Mayor, time. Time.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any discussion?
Yes, we do have the facility naming committee that has drawn up already sort of a list of conditions or the way they evaluate names for putting in the name on a facility. I think it would make sense for that committee to be able to draw up some conditions for meeting the requirements to receive this prestigious honor. And perhaps they could also discuss with Downtown Improvement District or one of the organizations that's working with downtown to see where a likely location would be considered. But something to formalize it a little bit more so that progress can be made. And putting it with the Facility Naming Commission, I think, is a good start because they do have experience in sort of trying to make these careful determinations about who would receive these honors.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I'd like to offer that as an amendment, Mayor, if that'd be all right?
All right, let me see if there's any other discussion, no? Motion is amended? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion, please, along with your agenda item, to add number 64 to it as well. It's also speaking of ethylene oxide in its presentation.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yes.
So moved.
I accept the amendment.
Amended, as amended.
Motion, we already voted on.
Voted.
All right. Motion. Motion, second motion, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, number 3.
We have public comment.
Discussion with possible action on the presentation of ethylene oxide surveillance study and air quality program that was created by City Council in 2022 and any matters related thereto. The reason this was brought up was twofold. Since the air quality is a core function of city government, the public needs to be informed about the status of the City of Laredo's air quality program that was created by City Council resolution over 2.5 years ago, in April of 2022, where the City Council approved the program and agreed to the amount of $105,360 to fund this program. This program, which was the first city action of this kind to create an air quality program, was never funded or staffed with an air quality specialist. Now, the second part of this item is for the public to hear the results of the city-funded ethylene oxide surveillance program, especially since the city currently does not have any ETO monitors in the community. It was important to find out that what the study showed and a highlighted risk from this emission to our community. Let's start with the air quality program. I remember being at all these meetings with the health director and the fire chief, pushing hard for this program and monitored when I was the health authority back then, along with discussing other CDC programs which involved pilot voluntary blood tests with the University of Illinois. The City Council did not approve the air quality program because of the immense community support and organizations such as the Clean Air Coalition. The City Council did approve, the air quality program. But we are now left with a program that was defunded by previous management without City Council approval. So my first motion on this item will be to fund this previously approved program that was promised in 2022 that includes the air quality specialist that was approved. I would also like to commit $50,000 from the mayor's priority funds to the health department to use for this program. And if needed, to place higher end sensors. I leave this to the discretion of the health department throughout the city to set the program properly and have the information available to the public.
Second.
This is my motion.
Mayor, maybe I would also, add to those 50,000 from discretionary funds or from district priority funds from District 2. So we have the same amount for 50,000.
Motion as amended. And also, I would like the health department to come up and give us an update as where we stand, and I understand there's some citizen comments and the presentation of ethylene oxide surveillance study.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Dr. Richard Chamberlain, your Public Health Director, and I first off want to start off by saying thank you very much for the financial contributions to the air quality monitoring program, as it was a program that was brought to the council's forum during the budget process in 2022, August 10th of 2022, where we did discuss this, but the funding was ultimately transferred over to Rio Grande International Study for some great work that's going to be discussed here today. But just hearing the support from council to be able to help drive the air quality monitoring program here in the city of Laredo, which I've discussed with other public health directors along the border. El Paso does not have one. Hidalgo County, which is McAllen and all the areas, does not have one. And Brownsville, Cameron does not have one as well. So we will be the first and we will be leading this. They do get their air quality from TCEQ and the monitors that they do have, but as a community, we're going to be leading this effort as a border community.
Mayor, may I?
Yes, go ahead.
Just for clarification, so are we talking about a bigger umbrella than just ethylene oxide?
Well, specifically for the air quality monitoring program, it is a bigger umbrella. It is SO2, NO2, CO2, excuse me, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, ozone, particulate matter. So we'll be looking at all the 6 common air pollutants that are out there and that are currently monitored at the regulatory level, but we'll also be doing it with a regulatory monitor in a non-regulatory fashion, and then with also sensors as well across the community. We're also very hopeful that with one of our grant awards that we'll be participating in the Purple Air realm, that'll be able to give out monitors to 1,000 different homes in the community to help strengthen also that component of the community being involved in air quality monitoring and, of course, their decisions to participate in outdoor activities.
So Mayor, may I continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the particulate matter 2.5 is what we've been discussing for the last several months of trying to approve the $75,000 grant to get those low-cost air monitors in communities. And this Purple Air monitoring program coincides with that low-cost monitor. And if you, Purple Air is actually an internet-based network, right? So that anyone can look at these privately held monitors in different areas and see what the air quality is, again, at not a specific level, but enough of a level to determine overall air quality. If you look on a map, Purple Air right now, Laredo has zero. But surrounding communities in the valley, El Paso, Brownsville, Corpus, San Antonio, Monterrey, they all pop up. And we can see that communities are really being serious about finding out what their air quality is and make determinations for public health just to improve, mitigate pollution when necessary, and create a safer environment for their citizens. So I think this Purple Air idea is wonderful. I think it's far time that we participate in this type of program. And this, again, will coincide with this bigger grant that is coming from the Border Environmental Collaboration Commission to extend the reach of where we can find out about air quality, the neighborhoods we can find out about it, and then begin to inform decisions that we can make here in council to help improve our air quality for our citizens.
Any other questions?
I want to say one more time, thank you very much for the additional staff member that will be supporting the air quality monitoring program at Laredo Public Health. And as mentioned, we will be the first border community to start this up on our own. So this is a definite win, and we truly appreciate that. So now I'm going to facilitate an introduction that will facilitate another introduction. So we do have Miss.
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to clarify with management, are we allowed to use our district priority funds for these monitors?
No, Mayor and the City Council, the priority funds have to be used on brick and mortar. What we will do is we will take the funding that you do provide us with, and we'll move that money to where it can be spent on in brick and mortar, and then we will equate the same amount into the action of where we're going.
Because I would also like to contribute towards that for District 7 as well.
All right.
District 3 as well.
All right, so motion is amended, District 3 and District 7. And 8.
And 5.
Motion says amended.
And 6. I don't want to be left out.
Glad you came.
Okay.
All right. Have we voted on the motion?
Mayor, I did want to comment though.
Yes.
I just want to clarify, I know there's all this discussion about air monitors and reading what's in the air and everything, and when it comes to ethylene oxide, that's a very specific, it's a gas, it's not the same thing as a particulate matter, and the sensors and the way that is read is not the same as these low-cost sensors, and so, since we're talking about ethylene oxide, I think it's important to understand that as much as we would want to put however many sensors, it's not going to pick up ethylene oxide. And the biggest concern for District 7 right now is ethylene oxide. So that's why I'm very grateful that the city funded this ethylene oxide program. I'm excited for the community to hear the results, and I know that we're pending a bigger community meeting, but I would like to request that we also focus on ethylene oxide, as part of our monitoring, which is going to involve different types of sensors. Even if we were to participate in these low-quality sensor program, it's not gonna pick up ethylene oxide, and I want the public to understand that as well.
That is correct, council member, and I can state that in our planning for our air quality monitoring program, we do know that ethylene oxide analysis is quite expensive. But it's something that we do want to propose in the future budget cycle to include at least the same assessment that we can do for an additional $100,000, even though that's a pretty heavy lift, also just for a couple of weeks worth. But at least it'll give us data on a routine basis and not something that is continuous, like we have ozone and PM 2.5 and CO2 that we'll be able to be sharing with the community on a routine basis. But that is something that is up for consideration.
Go ahead.
Just to elaborate, I think that since we're all on board with, I mean, this council has unanimously supported, you know, looking after the air and everything. But I do think it's important for us to distinguish that and make it clear, because you could put a low-cost monitor, let's say outside of Muller, and it's not gonna pick up ethylene oxide. So we need to make sure that people understand that in combination with whatever else we're looking for, we do have to have some specialized ethylene oxide involved in the program, or else it's not gonna give the public a true reading, especially since we do have the pollution plant here. And maybe other border cities don't have one, but we do, and we have one of the largest emitters in the country. So it's important for us to have those monitors for that specific chemical.
Mayor.
All right, go ahead.
Quick question, Dr. Chamberlain. Are we gonna have the districts involved in all this?
The districts as
Like
in.
the UISD, NLISD district, El Dorado College, and, or in TAMU, are we gonna get them involved in all this program, or something that you wanna?
This is something that as a municipal government, public health is charged with in other jurisdictions that do have these programs. And the contributing partners such as the other governmental organizations are more than welcome to collaborate. But ultimately, this is led by the municipal government.
Are we reaching out to them, you know, telling them we're gonna do all this?
This is something that is new, so after this conversation, we will definitely be making that
great.
known to all the different partners, sir.
All right.
Yes, go ahead.
So, yeah, it's putting on two hats, right? Because you have the air quality that's gonna look at particulate matter and these other gases. But ethylene oxide is, as Councilmember Bettis was saying, is completely separate. But if you keep bringing up the air quality, again, there's an opportunity to partner with an organization that already has money to fund some of those low-cost air sensors. And I hope council will consider to go ahead and move forward with that, because when you're talking about this air quality program that we're setting up, the sensor program that RISC has brought forward is completely aligned with it. As far as the ethylene oxide emission detection goes, the new EPA rules have in there that there must be a continuous emissions monitoring system required of sterilizing plants. And so this may speak to that need for the city to find out what those emissions are. And perhaps it will not, while I do think the $100,000 to make sure, double check that the plant is doing its job and monitoring like it needs to monitor. I mean, we do need to make sure that the monitoring is occurring. But it seems as if there are EPA rules that will require the plant to monitor themselves, those emissions. And what we need to do as a body is figure out how we can get that data. Because I didn't see in the report that, or the guidelines that EPA put out, that they're gonna require that that data is turned over to the public to a public entity, a public government. And so somehow we need to figure out that piece, because if they're continually monitoring their data and they tell us, don't worry, everything's okay, I don't think that's good enough, right? As city government, we need to have proof and we need to see those data sets. So it'll be, I think, we have some teeth in what EPA is proposing, and then if you can come back and tell us how we can have more teeth, so we can be checking this very sensitive data that is expensive to collect and hard to collect, but that is so necessary to our public
Yes.
health here.
Before we have somebody from UISD present, Ms. Mina Garza.
We're gonna introduce them in a little bit, Mayor.
Mayor, if I may make a
Yes, go
comment?
ahead.
I just wanna, just kind of go back a little bit on, you know, when ethylene oxide first came to our attention, it was Tricia and I that kind of were notified about this, and we were talking to the reporters, and that's kind of how this whole thing started. And then the Clean Air Coalition, Laredo Coalition, was formed, And when that was formed, it was formed in partnership with the city council, with UISD, LISD, the county. The work to get everybody on board with this initiative was already done, and the Clean Air Coalition hasn't disbanded. It's just kind of gone dormant because we were waiting for the result. I mean, we've been pushing for the EPA to change their rules. We've been pushing for this monitoring program. We were waiting for the results, but that entity is still there. So I think that if we could just, maybe we have a little bit of already some of this groundwork done with getting the entities on board. Maybe we just kind of like kickstart that work again through that, or maybe through this entity, or merge them somehow, like we did with the Autism Coalition, where we merged them or something. But I think that we had a good foundation with the other entities to help out, because they did fund this monitoring program as well.
All right, thank you. So, yeah.
So if you'd allow me, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the Executive Director of the Rio Grande International Studies Center, Ms. Trisha Cortez, who will introduce her partner.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Councilmember Bettis, for putting this very critical issue before us. Mayor, we did want to recognize members from UISD who are in the audience. They were one of the 4 anchor institutions that did fund this fence line air monitoring study, and that's the Associate Superintendent for Administration and Operations, Mr. Mike Garza, and their General Counsel, Mr. Jaime Garcia. And just a quick overview, we're very grateful how the City of Laredo has been a very staunch supporter in terms of trying to understand the situation with ethylene oxide in Laredo, with Councilmember Vanessa Perez leading that. We learned about this in the spring of 2021. We had to work with air scientists to guide us through the labyrinth of EPA databases to really understand how serious this situation is for Laredo, where Midwest sterilization compares nationally at the very top in terms of usage and in terms of emissions, and how those emissions have led to very elevated cancer level risks in Laredo from that one air toxic. And we did print out and give to everybody a copy of Dr. Peltier's analysis, as well as a summary of the 2 cancer cluster studies that the Department of State Health and Human Services did for 6 census tracts around Midwest, and what they found. That being said, Mayor, so we discovered this in 2021, like Councilmember Bettis said. The Clean Air Laredo Coalition formed, and then started to go to the other anchors, let them know. These governmental bodies took action to join the Clean Air Laredo Coalition. And then in 2022, Webb County provided $35,000, UISD $35,000, LISD $30,000, and we have the City of Laredo with $100,000 for a total of $200,000. We did email out a summary report, financial report. The funds for the $200,000, it was for a 7-week study that happened in the fall last year at 12 sites, and all of the funding, almost all of it, went toward those who collected the data, a firm out of Dallas, the private lab, and then also with Dr. Peltier, who independently did a QA/QC and then ran the analysis for the report you're about to see.
All right, before we go into the report,
Yes, sir.
we have a motion on the table. We'd like to vote on it. Ethylene oxide.
Yes, Dr. Peltier is going to give the highlights of the analysis.
We need to vote on
was done.
that before we go on.
Got it, understood.
So,
And just the last thing, sorry.
yeah, hold on. Before we
Oh,
go
got
on,
it, got it.
let's vote on what we have on the table. Motion second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passed. Go ahead.
And just lastly, okay, sorry. As Councilmember Bettis said, the last part of this whole project is to do a community town hall to update the residents in Laredo of what the findings were for these 7 weeks, and to also bring a legal update on the new rules that passed, as you mentioned, Councilmember Cigarro, in March, and sort of potential next steps, gathering input from the community and potential next steps with regard to that. So without further ado, it's wonderful, by the way. Thank you all for your support with the air quality monitoring. It is very specialized for air toxics, and we hope some of that funding can go toward more ETO fence line air monitoring. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Professor Dr. Richard Peltier. He's an air scientist. He's the technical partner in this, and he's based out of the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, well, thank you all very much. Hopefully you can see my screen. This bright screen is shared. I am Rick Peltier. I'm a professor at the University of Massachusetts. And just to be clear and open, that I have no formal relationship with Clean Air Laredo, the US EPA, TCEQ, and Tricia and I have never even met in person. I'm an independent scientist who helped RISC put together an analysis of the data sets that were collected. I also played no role in the study design, so I was not part of that process at all. And while I'd like to be able to toss in some of my discretionary funds for this kind of work as well, I'm not able to do that, of course. And so what I'm going to talk about today is a very brief overview. I see you have a really thick agenda to get through today, so I will be concise and move quickly, but I'm always willing to stop and answer questions if you have them, but I'll try to be clear so that the questions are answered as I go along. I want to start with what ethylene oxide is to get all of us on the same page. This is not a detailed discussion of it, but it's this colorless and odorless gas. You can't detect it, you can't see it. You can't smell it, doesn't feel like anything, so it's really hard to perceive it in our environment. And the vast majority of ethylene oxide is used in two different industries. One is sterilization, and that's what we're talking about today, and the other is a process gas. It's a reactive compound, so it's really useful to produce products. Generally speaking, we don't see a lot of emissions from process gas use of ethylene oxide, but we do see a lot coming from sterilization facilities, including Midwest Sterilization Services. Where it comes from, it depends on the facility. Every one is different. We know that it comes from stack emissions, that is the chambers that are doing the sterilization process. We know the ethylene oxide is ventilated through these chambers and sent through scrubbing materials to capture a lot of it. That's a known problem or a known source. We also know that sometimes there are aeration chambers where it will ventilate for a period of time, and those are often also sent through a scrubbing stack. But the one that's a big question is what we call fugitives. And fugitive sounds like a nefarious thing, and in fact with ethylene oxide it is. Fugitives are all of the other emissions that happen that aren't in a stack, that aren't captured in a cleaning device like a chamber that scrubs away the ethylene oxide. That comes from things like products that are sitting in a pallet that have just recently been sterilized on a warehouse floor, or in the back of a truck ready to go for their next facility. These things still have lots of ethylene oxide within them, and they continue to aerate for days to weeks, sometimes even months, where ethylene oxide leaches off these materials and contributes to the load you see in a community. A very quick timeline, how did we get here? Why are we all talking about ethylene oxide? It sounds like this is a really abrupt thing that just sort of popped up in the world, and in fact it's a little longer than that. Back in 1985, some 40 years ago, it was deemed as reasonably anticipated to be a carcinogen. That's the limit of our knowledge back then, 4 decades ago. We didn't have enough evidence to say that this was carcinogenic. It was reasonably anticipated, which legally speaking is a different designation. And EPA started a new review in 1998, but it took decades to complete that review. Eventually, that review was finalized in 2016. We're talking 30 years later, where it was sufficient that there was enough evidence to say that this stuff is carcinogenic. As a result, the NATA report was released in 2018, which showed these big red blobs of excess cancer risk all over the United States, all in the vicinity of many of these ethylene oxide sterilizers. And then, of course, in 2024, a new EPA rule was promulgated. It's still rolling out. There's still probably some litigation that might happen, but that rule is now front and center. And that's really an emissions control rule. It doesn't have anything to do with ambient concentrations. It's really, if you're an ethylene oxide facility, you have to do certain things to control your emissions. So locally here in Laredo, we see that the Midwest Sterilization is located here in that red box in the center of the screen. And there are a variety of locations to the north and to the south that designate each sampling site that was chosen by the contractor who did this work. In green and red boxes are background sites. These are sites that are far away. The background in green is up to the northwest, and the red site, which was the background site for the normal measurements, were to, I think it was at Laredo College, but it was many, many miles away. The prevailing wind in the area goes from the southwest, I'm sorry, the southeast to the northwest, that big arrow. And there are two kind of classes of locations that were sampled for ethylene oxide during the study. In green, we had the primary sites, canister 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, stretching between, say, 100 meters from the fence line all the way up to about 1,000 meters or so away. There were also other sites, we call them alternative sites or alternate sites. This was to the south primarily of the facility, and the main role of these alternative sites were to be a monitoring location when the weather was acting a little wacky in Laredo. Sometimes you have weather that comes through and changes the wind direction, so having an alternative set of sites to sample from sometimes can let you capture more information. This is all the data, all 200.
Dr. Peltier, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but can you go back to the previous map that you were just showing?
Of course.
Do you happen, I know in your study you had a more satellite specific view, you had the school and you had like the streets and stuff. Do you have that information? Like, do you have this data on a more, satellite version of where these canisters are later in the presentation or at some point?
Not in this presentation. I do have access to that information, but I don't have it in this. It's largely to make it easier to see the canister locations. When you have a lot of information on a figure like this, it gets a little muddled.
Okay, just so people can understand like how close it was to the neighborhoods and things out there.
Sure.
Thank you.
Totally understand. And so of all of the samples that were collected, about 237 or so, this is what they look like. And to orient you to what this means, this is called a histogram. And a histogram on the bottom of the graph is the concentration that was within each canister. And it ranges, in this case, from about 0.01 to a little more than 10. The highest was about 23 parts per billion. You don't need to know the science behind that, but as you look at the canisters here, the number of canisters that were in each monitoring level is on the y-axis, the left side of the axis. So if we have that big spike sort of towards the middle, that tells me that there were roughly 17, 18 canisters that were around 0.9 parts per billion. And so you see this wide distribution of sampling. There's a lot of data here to chew on, and it's really hard to interpret what this means, except that it does tell me that all kinds of different concentrations were observed in all kinds of different canisters. Now here's the $10,000 question. What's considered to be a safe level? Where would this fall? And that bar that's on the far left of your screen, that might be considered a safe level. To be clear, EPA doesn't set a safe level. Some states do. TCEQ does not yet at least. But the state of Georgia, for example, does set a safe level, and it's even further to the left of that plot. It's actually off the screen. It's so small. The point is that every single sample that was collected is elevated above what is probably considered to be a safe level for ethylene oxide. And it turns out that distance is really important. The further you are away from a facility like Midwest, the lower the concentration happens to be. And that gives us at least some element of comfort. At the top of this figure, you see in blue the different sampling sites, canister 1, canister 2, all the way up to canister 6. As you move from left to right, that's further and further away. So the canister 1 and canister 2 are right next to the facility, and canisters 5 and 6 are a bit further away. And you see this trend, as you move to the right, the concentrations go down, the lines get smaller, which means that the further you are away from this facility, the less ethylene oxide you would expect to see. That's actually very common in the air pollution world. We see that regularly with a phenomenon known as dilution. As you move away from a source, the concentration goes down. And at the very bottom of this figure in orange are the two background concentrations. But there's a trick here, and that is that the scales used on this figure are different. The one in orange is much, much, much lower than the ones in blue. So while it does look like there might be some differences between those two, the fact is the ones in blue are much, much, much higher than the background concentrations that were sampled in Laredo. To put it into even further context, if you look at just the background places, these are places where there's no known source of ethylene oxide. We saw concentrations around 0.05 to 0.07. You don't need to know the science behind that. But then if you look at the two canisters that were near the facilities, canister 5 and canister 6, those are actually the furthest canisters away from the facility, almost a mile away. They're still 3 to 4 times higher than what you saw in the background location. The point here is that even a mile away from the facility, you're elevated by a factor of 3 or 4 compared to the background measurement that was collected at the same time. That means that this ethylene oxide is coming from this Midwest sterilization facility. There's really not much dispute here. Now, this is a very messy plot, and I'll try to orient you to it. It's known as a polar plot. And in the middle, in the pink box, you can see the Midwest sterilization facility. And all the little crosses you see are cardinal directions. This is northeast, south, and west. And each one is centered on a canister sampling location. So these are all the data from each location that was sampled around this facility. I've excluded the ones in the background, by the way. I've just gotten rid of those, only looking at canister locations 1 through 6. And there's also a color scale applied here. And when the winds blow from a certain direction, we can plot that on this figure, showing that when the winds are blowing from the direction of the facility, the color is redder. And that means that there's more ethylene oxide here. And the opposite is true when the winds are blowing from a different direction, for example, from the north and east, the colors tend to be bluer, cleaner. That's background air, clean air, no ethylene oxide. And this is sort of pointing the finger directly at the facility from the canisters that were located to the north and to the south. All are giving this consistent message, pointing us directly at this one facility as the primary source for the ethylene oxide that's observed at these locations. And last but not least, this is the last part. I know it's been a long day, or will be a long day, is a comparison of where your study falls with other studies that are similar. And in red on the far left, the bright red color, are the 2 sets of measurements of all the data from Laredo that were collected in this research project. We have the fence line concentration at the facilities. So we see the average concentration around 5 parts per billion during your study. And the background concentration is, again, 0.05, 0.06, something like that. In the darker red is the similar work that was done by the US EPA Region 6. They collected something like 37 samples over the course of a couple of months, and they have very, very consistent results. It's essentially the same thing. So the work that was done in this study that you funded is exactly the same as what the EPA found at a similar time point. How does this compare to other studies in the United States? There are some 70 or 80 sterilizer facilities that are thought to be problematic for ethylene oxide. I chose a few just arbitrarily because I'm familiar with them and I know how their data look. I chose 3 different facilities in metropolitan Atlanta and a facility in Chicago. It's actually Gurnee, Illinois, looking at the typical concentrations you see at the fence lines. And so what we see here in the fence lines in Atlanta, in the bright green colors, we see concentrations, at least at one place, the Sterilization Services of America, SSA, has similar concentrations to what you see in Laredo, but the other 2 ones, Becton Dickinson and Sterigenics, are quite a bit lower. In Chicago, at the Gurnee fence line, we see even lower concentrations. The point here, if the take-home message to this, is that the concentrations observed in Laredo, both by this study that you funded, but also the EPA, for the most part, are some of the highest we've seen in the United States at the fence line. This is a significant source of ethylene oxide for a community. And so I'll wrap things up with a quick summary, a conclusion. The take-home message is that we see it. It's obvious in the data. We can see it with multiple different ways. We might analyze a data set like this. All the messages are consistent that these concentrations are coming from this one facility, the Midwest Sterilization Facility, and that these concentrations we see really throughout the entire neighborhood are well elevated above the background concentrations that were collected very far away. And while ethylene oxide really only seems recently of interest to scientists and to regulators, it's always been a potent carcinogen. The only thing that's changed is the regulatory designation. The science that we understand has accumulated in such a way that we feel confident to say this is carcinogenic. It's always been carcinogenic. We just haven't had the data to prove that this is a risk to society. But now we do, and so now we have to react from it. And again, we don't know anything about the inside of this facility, about how it operates and where this ethylene oxide comes from. The most likely scenario would be that it comes from the loading docks and the storage spaces that are storing sterilized products, but we don't know. That's just a guess because we don't know what this facility looks like. The stacks, the emission stacks that are sampling from chambers probably are not the main source. Because those are monitored by TCEQ, they're monitored by continuous emissions monitors that are operated by the facility. It's possible, but it's unlikely. The most likely scenario that we've seen are these sterilized pallets of materials that are ready to go to their vendors. And with that, I will end and I'll let you move on to your next agenda topic. But before that, I'm happy to answer or address any questions that you might have.
Go ahead, there's a question here.
Dr. Peltier, I know when you're going over the data, it's all measured in parts per billion. And my assumption is that is because the canisters, that is what they can detect. And it's very difficult to detect anything smaller than that. Parts per billion is a very small sample. But I read, and I'm wondering if you could confirm that ethylene oxide is dangerous at levels in the trillions, like 11 trillionth of particles in a cubic liter of air are considered dangerous and carcinogenic for humans. Is that true?
That is true. So to talk about units a little bit, yes, I talked about this in parts per billion for the entire presentation. If you're familiar with ethylene oxide data, you also might see another unit, the microgram per cubic meter. I didn't talk about that intentionally. Those are proportional to one another and they can be converted very easily. But you're right, the best, most honest answer I can give is that the only safe level of ethylene oxide is 0. But that's not practical in many conditions. So we have to assume that there's some allowable risk. And the allowable risk by EPA is computed to be in the parts per trillion concentration range. That's thousands of times smaller than we see anywhere in Laredo.
Right, and I would agree with you that perhaps it's the fugitive emissions that are the issue. We know that Midwest Sterilization has reported that they have mitigation measures for approximately 99.9% of their emissions. Assuming that these mitigation measures, the cleaners, the scrubbers are working at 100% efficiency, of course. But this facility is reporting a usage of 1.3 million pounds per year. So at whatever level they can control those emissions, you still get a number at the end that is just very high for our community. 1.3 million pounds per year, even if it 99.9% control and you get maybe 1,000 or 1,300 pounds of emissions, which would be kind of a gold standard, right? 99.9% control is still too much ethylene oxide emitted in our community. And then that does not count the fugitive emissions, because if you imagine they're using 1.3 million pounds of sterilization, that means they're churning out all these products that have been sterilized with the ethylene oxide. So unless there's some big control room that they have all those pallets stacked for months until all of those ethylene oxide, all the ethylene oxide has been emitted from the actual product, we're going to see a higher level of emissions. I think your data just confirm, or the interpretation of the data that was taken confirms what we can reasonably expect from such great usage of ethylene oxide.
I wish I could argue with you, but I can't. You're absolutely right. That's an enormous amount of ethylene oxide. The one twist to the fugitives are that they're not easy to quantify because they come from so many different places. And it's hard to make a measurement of all the different sources that come from fugitives. So it's hard to enumerate that.
Councilman, you have a question?
Sir, yes, sir. Dr. Rick Peltier, thank you for doing all this services you're doing for the city. My question is that now that we have all this data, what's your recommendation or solution that the city should take forward from this, starting this point going forward? Now that we did this coalition, what should we do? From your recommendation, from your experience, what should the city do and take to this point?
Yeah, so this is a hard question to answer because there's no right or wrong answer here, because it involves the US EPA, it involves TCEQ, it involves the city, but it also involves an industry that can be valued and produces a product that's useful. And so you've got all of these different factors at play here.
But my question is, what can we do? Like, what's a solution that you might recommend out of your experience, out of your testings? What can we do as a city?
Sure. So one of the things is keep monitoring. It's hard and expensive and complicated, but you have to hold these industries accountable for their emissions. TCEQ, advocate to TCEQ that they pay attention to this. That this is valued by the city of Laredo. That you want this taken care of, and you value the health of the people who live in Laredo, and that this should be prioritized by TCEQ to investigate. They have access to resources that we don't, and they know that this is a problem, as does EPA. And so I would advocate, I would encourage you to consider advocating to your TCEQ staff members that you perhaps work with in your different agencies, but also find the funding to do continued research and sample some of this data. I heard some interest in additional sampling. Perhaps an ethylene oxide monitor is in the cards.
If I may, Mayor, Councilmember Rangel, I think for the immediate, what the city could do right away is to meet with Midwest and ask two primary questions, and that is, what controls does Midwest need to install to comply with the new rule that came out in March of this year, and pin them down to find out when do they plan to complete the installation of those controls. I think that those are very just critical, immediate questions that we need answers to.
So, Ms. Cortez, my question is, where do we get that information to hold them accountable for? Who will tell us the solution to get our legal team or legal action, go over there and tell Midwest, this is what you should do, you should go contact TCQ, or this is the solution? Who do we contact? Who's our main contact for that?
So the EPA right now has issued these rules that happened in March. And so they're giving these commercial sterilizers a couple of years to get into compliance, and they have to put in controls, they have to scrub the air more. And the new rules are a good start, but there is litigation happening right now on both sides. But there's also litigation to try to strengthen the rules of the EPA. So for now, the city could go to Midwest with the new rules from the EPA, because the EPA is telling these commercial sterilizers, you have X amount of time to get into compliance. And
Well, let me see, for the rules that they're saying, or
yes,
do we have, is there others, just right now, just talking, there's nothing that we can do to have better air quality, just to monitor, and that's it? For the meantime, it's just gonna be monitoring the air, and that's it?
well, the city could certainly apply, could meet with the company and request that they get on an expedited schedule to put in their controls and at a much faster level, and also do these things. The city can request turn over this data that you're doing internally. It's not measuring everything at all, and it's not fence line monitoring only inside the plant, but these things can be made public. But certainly, Councilmember Rangel, where the city does have leverage, is to get with the company and say, what exactly are you going to put in to meet these new rules, and by when are you going to do that, and how fast can you do it, and do it as quickly as possible, because Laredo is an outlier in terms of how high these emissions are nationally.
And Ms. Cortez, I think we should keep on monitoring as a city until the EPA rules go into effect. I think they have 5 years until they, 2 years? 2 years until they go into effect. So, those are the things we can do. Dr. Chamberlain, do you have anything to add? Yeah, let me get Dr. Chamberlain. Have anything else to add?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I firmly agree, and which is why just a few moments ago I did share that ethylene oxide should be part of the program, as mentioned by Councilmember Perez. It's not something that we can do routinely on a weekly basis, even on a monthly basis, due to the costs that are associated with it. But it's something that we can make the investment into and do it at least one time for those 4, 5, 6 weeks out of the year to be able to have that data routinely, but then going back to making those requests to EPA to share that data with us from the regulatory side, so that way it can be able to help drive additional decisions that need to be made by this council.
And do we have a budget for that?
Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
is there any grants that we can go out for so we can fund this? Mr. Chairman?
We have gone out for grants. There isn't any right now currently that are posted, but we're always on the lookout for new award opportunities that we can seek. But we have to remember they are competitive and they aren't just an official handout of money.
Other than grants, would we have a budget?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, we would have to put a budget together in order to continue with the process. Of course, we went through the cycle of learning what we were afraid we would find as well too. Now it's taking this data and then determining what to do with the data. I think that's where we're at. So putting together the plan, I think you took a good step with the efforts of every one of your districts and everything with establishing an individual that would help us as well too within our staffing for that purpose. That was an intention early on, but then we took this side path to make sure, and we provided those funds to risk in order to do this work. And so now it is coming back full circle kind of, and then moving it back forward. In my mind, I don't think we're going to have any concerns with trying to find the funding in order to start the process. And again, I think based upon the conversation that Ms. Cortez said, it's communication with the company, talking with them to determine exactly how they intend to meet these updated standards that are by EPA. And so we've got a lot of different steps within that, and I think we've got a good direction for that. So I don't have any worry about putting together the funding, but I think the big thing is incorporating all of this together and then moving it forward.
All right, thank you. Mayor, Councilwoman, did you have?
Yeah, I did, Mayor. Just thank you. I just wanted to, we've talked about this, Tricia and I, and you know, Earth Justice and other scientists, and I've even met with Dr. Peltier on Zoom and everything about what we can do. And so that's one of the reasons why I brought one of my items. Like, there's things that you can and can't do. One thing that we can control as a city is our zoning, regulating where these plants are allowed to be located. Maybe we can't really move Midwest, but we can prevent for the future, maybe require them to be located in an M2 zoning or something like that. And then one of the big fugitive emissions is one of the big topics here, is that TCEQ and EPA regulate the emissions being released from the plant on the stack, but they really don't regulate the fugitive emissions. And so one of the discussion points, because I think it's important for the public to also understand that a lot of the EPA changing of the rule had to do with communities like ours pushing back and requiring it because they were 8 years overdue, and it required a lot of advocacy work. And so, you know, Laredo did have a big, important voice in that. And they don't regulate the off-gassing or the fugitive emissions for the items after they're sterilized. And I think that if you look at the data from around the plant, something's going on that's causing there to be a high concentration around this particular area. And what's concerning, you know, and one of the reasons why I brought my agenda item, and since we brought it up, I'm just gonna speak on it briefly real quick, but is that we have warehouses going up in District 7, and we wanna make sure that these products that are immediately sterilized are not immediately transported into a warehouse to be off-gassed, because now you have all this off-gassing product close to schools, close to houses, and we don't have regulation. That is something that the city can regulate because that's within our jurisdiction. We can make ordinances that control these types of things. And so as much as there's things that we can't do, I think as a city we do have jurisdiction, especially as a home rule city, to make policy changes as far as ordinances and things like that. One of them would be treating ethylene oxide, classifying it as a hazardous material, and regulating it in terms of distance from property. I did want to go back though to your presentation, Dr. Peltier, on the histogram, the histogram chart. I think it was like that one right there. You said that the background emissions was the far left, but I think you meant to say the far right from us. Are you talking about the little the little, one on the far right is the background, or are you talking about the taller one that's between 10 and 15 on the far left as the background?
Yeah, I'm talking about on the far left. The one on the far right was one very high concentration that was observed at canister one at some point. I don't recall what day it was. But the backgrounds are on the far left of this figure. That's what you see. There were 13 or 14 background samples collected over there that had low concentrations. Everything else is much higher than that.
But, so the background is between 0 and 5 or between 10 and 15?
The background is between 0 and 0.07. We're talking about very small numbers here.
Because I'm not seeing which one of these is the background.
Well, so they're all lumped in together. I guess I don't have the ability to show my mouse.
I'm just trying for the public because it's complicated, like histograms,
Yes.
box and whiskers, and all these plots. Which one? I mean, what is the acceptable level? Like, which one of these represents the acceptable amount
So it depends on who's answering that question.
from the EPA?
All the way to the far left. It's
The
actually
12?
further off. It's actually off this graph. It's so low that it wouldn't even be on this graph.
Okay, so you're saying that the acceptable level is like between, like not even between 0 and 1, and so all the readings are all very, very much higher. That's what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay, so that was my point, is so the public can understand that every canister that was, whatever was picked up was already way higher than what's acceptable. I don't think this really accurately reflects that main alarming point. And the second thing is that when you're close to the plant, the people that work there, the people that are spending, 8, 10, 12 hours, the business owners around there are breathing in like these very high concentration levels of ethylene oxide. And so I guess, I don't know, from a public health standpoint, it's also concerning and something for us to consider and look at as far as how we can regulate that.
And may I add one more thing? You touched on taking products that have been sterilized and moving them off site. That's actually a giant loophole in the federal regulations. That does not fall under the NESHAPE new rules that were implemented in April, which means that if you are a facility producing sterilized products, the only thing that falls under jurisdiction is the stuff coming out of your chambers and formal aeration rooms. But sterilized products sitting in a warehouse, if it's not on site, it's exempt from this rule.
So Mayor, and to Dr. Peltier, what he's saying, I think that's the reason why I think it's important for us to have some kind of ordinance or some kind of city policy that does regulate that, because we can't speak to things that are already regulated, but we can speak to the loopholes. And I think that's where it's important for us to look at what we can do to regulate and try to reduce the damage from these off-gassing as much as possible while we wait for, the facility to come into compliance with the new rules. Would that be fair, Dr. Peltier, to say?
Yeah, except the new rule actually does not regulate warehousing materials at all. It doesn't define that as a sterilizing facility. So if you're operating a sterilizing facility and then you take your products and you put them in a truck and you drive them across town into a big box that's a warehouse, that sterilized material is still going to off-gas, but it will not fall under any regulations. It will be a free admission.
So Mayor, my question to legal is, does that give us the opportunity to regulate that?
Sure, just a matter of how you do it, and we can always conform.
Okay, so I think that would be a good starting point and to talk about that.
Can you come back with a proposal regarding that?
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, Mayor, on my agenda item, if I can, talks about regulating ETO as a hazardous material to include storage regulations based on safe distances from school and residential areas and any other matters incident there too. So I think that agenda item, if council would agree, I'd like to make the motion that we explore what that safe distance is and options on how we can regulate these off-gassings in our warehouses and, fill in the loopholes so that we can make sure that we make our community air safer. That'll be my motion, Mayor.
Motion? Discussion?
Dr. Peltier, when So when we went as a community to discuss with EPA, we were jumping up and down about the warehousing of these products because, again, Midwest is the largest sterilizer plant. It uses twice as much ethylene oxide than any other sterilizer plant, and that's that their Midwest's other sterilizer plant is using half as much as this one, right? And so if you combine all the sterilizer plants in the country, this facility uses much more than all of them combined. Is it fair to say that, you know, warehousing and looking at that and requiring the same mitigation measures for those fugitive emissions that are coming off of the sterilized product as they do with stack emissions is one way to control ethylene oxide emissions? If we're looking at the off-gassing, then requiring those products to be in a warehouse that is controlling the emissions the same way they're controlling stack emissions is a safer, I don't even know if it's safe, but it's a safer way to think about how we allow ethylene oxide products in our community, ethylene oxide sterilized products in our community.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm not a lawyer, but the regulations are fairly clear how they define a sterilization facility, and that does include warehousing if that warehouse is attached to the sterilizer or on its property or on its site. But in a community that has lots of warehouses that might be 5 miles away, it's not a very big heavy lift to load up a couple of trucks of freshly sterilized materials, drive them 5 miles away, and put them in another building. The federal law, the rule I should say by EPA, does not consider that an ethylene oxide source. And so that would be a free source that would just continue to leach out ethylene oxide on these freshly sterilized products. So it's a giant loophole. And I think you're on the right trail for tracking this material, whether you ban it in a certain location or at least you track it so you know where this material goes. That's at least a good first step. But this is a giant gaping loophole in if fugitive emissions are the culprit here from off-gassing of materials. This is a giant loophole, and it's something that is actively being negotiated at the federal level, but I suspect it's going to take years, if not decades, for it to be fixed. So I think tracking these warehouses where these things are off-site is probably a really good first priority.
Yes, go ahead.
Just to clarify, I mean, I think we classify it as a hazardous material. I know Mr. Porter's here. We do have a certain way that we handle hazardous materials. Certain warehouse, they have to register with your department. They keep track of them. I think that right there would close the gap that where EPA doesn't require the companies to notify where they're off-gassing or where they're storing. So us requiring it because we're going to say, well, if this product has been sterilized, it's going to be considered, you know, a hazardous material, and then we can go ahead and create an ordinance that doesn't allow that storage within so many feet of a school or a house or a park and stuff like that. So we can start working on some distance requirements, and then we can also, I think, we should also explore the zoning requirements for moving forward. And not allowing these types of plants to be located in M1s around other businesses, but instead put them in M2 locations, which are more heavily industrial manufacturing type zoning, or even creating a specialized zoning. But I think all of that would be good for legal to explore and bring us back some policy, because other than that, and we can continue to brainstorm, but I think that's a good first step for us, because those are things that we can regulate. I don't think we can force warehouse owners to install the same control measures if it's not an actual plant, because I think that would fall under the EPA or the TCQ, EPA jurisdiction or TCQ, so.
All right, we have a motion. Any second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Mayor, back on the question about budget and everything. Of course, we have not talked real numbers yet. That's the challenge we have with this. I do know that you are scheduled for a couple other air monitoring summits in the next couple weeks, and I expect that what we're going to see out of that is a formulation of how how the city wants to undertake its air monitoring and its systems with that. And for a budget, I would like to put that information all together. We do it all encompassing within all of those different parameters for that, because I know Health Department's active on a lot of different pieces of this now as well too. So I'd love to roll it together as one budget for that process. So I don't really have a number for you because we haven't really talked what is it going to cost us to do the ethylene oxide, but I would say that we should look at it as a broader level of air monitoring altogether.
All right, okay, thank you. All right, next item.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to open public hearings, 1 through 6.
Second. Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Number one, public hearing to approve exterior alterations which include the creation, addition of the door and two windows of the east side of the building's lots 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, Block 34, Western Division, located at 1016 Iturbide, Suite 9. The property is in the Old Mercado District. The Historic District Landmark Board denied the proposed scope of work. Therefore, the item is being presented at council consideration pursuant to the Laredo Land Development Code, Section 24.1.2.26, which states any person aggrieved by the decision of the Historic Landmark Board may appeal the decision of the council by filing a written appeal specifying the reasons therefore within 30 days at the time the order is issued. Staff does not support the application. Number two, public hearing ordinance adopting the proposed annual budget of fiscal year 2024-2025 with the approved motion by appropriating the proposed revenues, expenditures, and balances reported therein for the years beginning October 1, 2024 and ending September 30, 2025, consistent with the financial plan described in said annual budget. See Exhibit A and holiday schedule approved with the City Council of the Public Workshop on August 7 through 9, 2024, authorizing the city manager to implement said budget. Number three, public hearing adopting the proposed fiscal year 2025-2029 capital improvement plan in the City of Laredo as presented in City Council. Number four, public hearing introductory ordinance authorizing city manager to amend the fiscal year 23-24 general fund fire department's budget by increasing revenues and expenditures in the amount of $3,847 to appropriate funds awarded to Texas Municipal League for the funding of repairs to Unit 272. Number five, public hearing introductory ordinance authorizing city manager to amend fiscal year 2023-2024 general fund fire department's budget by increasing revenues and expenditures in the amount of $1,425 to appropriate funds awarded to the Texas Municipal League for the funding of repairs to Unit 326. Number six, public hearing introductory ordinance amending fiscal year 2023-2024 911 regional administration budget by appropriating additional revenues and expenditures provided by the Commission on State Emergency Communications in the amount of $1,598,165 to fund the NG 911 program for the South Texas region, including Jim, Hogg, Star, Webb, and Zapata counties, for a total biennium amount of $7,195,515 for the period beginning September 1, 2023 through August 31st, 2025.
Ready?
That's it.
That's it.
Oh,
Number one.
Public hearing number one, anyone wishing to speak for or against? For or against? For or against? Have a motion?
So I wanted to just share a couple thoughts, and yes.
Yes, sir. Go ahead with
Go
the public comment. Your name, sir, please.
Good evening, my name is Jimmy Guerrero. We asked to open up one door on Tatangelo a couple of months ago, and unfortunately, I don't know why, we got denied, and I appealed for it, and I'm here right now. You guys, I have the pictures, but they made it big, so I don't know how to pass it to you guys to see. And the only thing was we had pipelines on the gas line. We couldn't open up a door right there. And one gentleman asked me, why don't you open up the door in the middle? And as far as it shows, there is a gas line we cannot open. And after that, we cannot do it because in back of the wall, it's a bathroom for the ladies and men's, and it's a bar. And we have air conditioning right there. So the only place we can do open it, it's right here, by the front.
Pro
Yes.
Tem? I have a question.
Yes, Councilwoman Segura.
Mr. Gelo, I believe, because it went through the Historic District Landmark Board and they were against the proposal, perhaps, perhaps it's because you're showing a very modern door and modern framing. Have you considered perhaps a historically detailed?
This is the building on other side in Iturbide. It is the same material, same windows.
Right,
That's 17 units, the building. And each unit is a bar and it's a restaurant. So
I guess because the Historic District Landmark Board denied it, and I understand they were looking at the facade where you want to put this door. And so if
they
the-
want it to be in middle, but we cannot do it. If you look at it, on the corner, I have the picture right here. This is the door, the entrance on the Iturbide.
Right.
Then,
So the Historic District Landmark Board told you that it was because the door was not located in the
no,
middle?
because the gentleman didn't know we have the gas line. He wants to open up in here. But here I can't, I have a gas
Right,
line.
yes,
And here further,
is the bar.
I have the bar, I have the air conditioning, then
Yes.
I have ladies' bathroom, men's bathroom, then it goes all the way back, there is another exit. And he asked me, why don't you bring the tables and everything out of front? Right here is the doors, and here we have a meter, electricity for the city. And this is Tatangelo. There is no way they could maneuver to come out.
Right.
And as far as you look at it right now, this is the parklet they did.
I'm just.
May I make a comment, Mayor Pro Tem?
Councilmember Torres, yes, sir.
So, I think that the issue, right, seems to be, and I don't know if maybe Vanessa could enlighten us here and explain to us a little bit more. And I wanted to defer to Councilmember Sierra. I know she wants to say a few thoughts, and then we interrupted her. But I don't think the type of door seems to be an issue because, like the gentleman mentioned, there's commercial standard doors on the Iturbide side, and then once you drive through Tatangelo Parkway on the east side, you see a bar right across the street doing exactly what he wants to do, and they even went above and beyond. They made glass windows and stuff right across the street. So I personally don't see why it's a problem. I do want to know, there seems to be a miscommunication as to what the Historic Commission is expecting. I would assume that the Historic Commission is in place, where he has a right to come and appeal, which is why we're hearing this today. And I think the Historic Commission has an obligation to protect, like Councilmember Sierra mentioned, the facade. Maybe I understand where she was going with the door, right, the type of door or historical preservation. But there seems to be commercial doors all along the building, right, already on Iturbide. I don't know if you or Councilmember Alyssa Cigarroa have.
Ms. Guerra, would you please?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Vanessa Guerra from planning staff. Yes, this item went to our historic board. It was presented, as the gentleman mentioned, to add the doors, very near the existing front doors. The concern was not the type of doors in this case. They matched very well the existing doors on the building, on the other side of the building. The concern for staff, of course, our analysis is based on the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitating historic buildings as well as the downtown guidelines. For us, the historic standards indicate that you shall not destroy significant features, and opening of new openings where none have previously existed are not recommended by the standards. For the Secretary of Interior standards, you should avoid alterations that remove or obscure the historic character. Again, including doors where none have ever existed, significantly alter the historic facade of this location. With regard to the middle doors, we recommended, staff does not support. However, if it were to be approved, we would recommend to maintain some semblance of symmetry on that facade by placing them somewhat in the middle. So that was where the middle came from. To be clear, that was not the historic board's recommendation. They recommended they denied it outright.
With no, may I redirect?
Yes, go ahead.
With no suggestion, they
No.
just said no.
They said no.
Because of the impact to the facade.
That's correct.
Do we know if the building that's also historic east of this building in question already had the existing glass windows and the suites that I'm seeing right here? Because that seems to be much more of a alteration to the facade, and maybe, I'm just, going far-fetched here. Maybe council did override the commission's recommendation. They allowed them to do those different suites at that point. I don't know, right? I'm just wondering, because I'm sure that building did not look like that when it was originally erected.
To be honest,
May I
I
say
didn't
something?
investigate it. I know that they remodeled the building. They did go through the historic board for the rehabilitation that they completed. I'm not familiar with the case.
I'm going to defer again to Councilmember Sierra. I'm all for supporting people that are trying to invest downtown. It's tough. We thank you because it's because of individuals and property owners like you that are keeping downtown alive, and supporting the efforts that this council is supporting through the leadership of Councilmember Cigarroa. But I would want to hear from her, and
May I
we
say
take it from
something?
there.
Go ahead, Mr. Fierro.
24 years ago, I was a tenant in this building. The building wasn't like that. Didn't have windows, didn't have doors. And I did three buildings in the same street, and it's working perfectly. And Ms. Sierra knows, on Flores also, we got the same thing to the historical to fix that building also. But unfortunately, you are giving across from my building this much occupancy. This is exactly this building. And you want my site to be empty? Is it fair? Or something is happening here I don't know about it? Please be fair.
Ms. Guerra, I have a question for you. How many feet is it off of where they would like it to be and where he needs it to be?
May I give you this one? This is, it says
See that
all
on the
of it.
projector?
Yeah, please.
That's what we did it for the,
I don't think this shows it. But they're looking for how many feet from the door is the door that you're proposing. I wanna
It's-
say it was in here somewhere.
it's right there on the designer, he put it for you.
Councilman Cigarro, would you like to say a few words, ma'am?
Well, I thank you so much for your investment in downtown, and I understand that this is it's quite frustrating, but I do believe in the process, and I personally support the recommendation by staff because of the guidelines from the Secretary of Interior standards. But if anybody else would like to,
And this has been since October 2022. It's already 2 years almost. And I don't see why.
I think what he's referring to is not this application, what he's referring to is the Parklet application.
Exactly.
He, submitted in November.
Also, we did for this.
November, no, sir, that's a different date, but we have your application for the Parklet came in, November 8th of 2022, and he was missing some documentation, the maintenance agreement, therefore that's why the Parklet permit was never issued, because he was still needing some documentation.
It wasn't documentation. They wanted to be better picture, this picture, to make it look better. Yes or no?
for the
Well,
parking.
Make it the picture
The
look
maintenance agreement was,
Yes,
we
yes,
we
ma'am.
still needed that.
Yes, ma'am.
Because that's a separate issue than what's
But
before
the
us right
issue
now.
right now, I'm concerning to open it, because it's gonna make the unbelievable beautiful. I saw it in other places, in other cities. And sometimes I saw in downtown, they deface buildings anyhow. But in my case, I just wanna open a door. That's all.
To answer your question, I don't know if you wanna put it on the screen. I don't have an exact number, but it looks like it's about 10 feet, possibly?
10 feet or so. Okay.
Or so, very close. This is the front door right here.
Okay.
See, right there is the front door.
This is where he's proposing it to be.
And this is where he's proposing. This is the door that he's proposing.
Okay. Councilwoman Melissa Cigarroa.
See, so would there be a way to have, and this is completely, I mean, if we agree, right? Would there be a way to have the features of this new door match the facade that you would be punching through?
You let me know what you want, I put it there.
Well,
I don't mind that, as long as I open up the door. For the tenant, he wants to bring his chairs and tables out, it's much easier. And I don't mind, you let me know anyhow, I bring anybody for you to show me what to do with what. This is.
And so this is to take advantage of a parklet that you're hoping to acquire, to get permitted.
Yes, ma'am. This is the,
And,
this is already in the city, they send everything we done, yes, ma'am.
so Ms. Guerra, is the parklet going to be permitted, do you believe?
If he submits all the required documentation, we did not foresee anything that would prevent him from being issued the parklet permit. It is within his hands to conform to the ordinance and submit all the required documentation. There's a maintenance agreement that he has to work out with legal.
That's the tenant. That's the tenant.
Whomever
I'm not the tenant. I'm
Oh.
opening the door.
Oh, so you're
for-
the owner? And you would be willing to create a
I'm doing
doorway
everything to beautify it.
that is,
For, because right now it's hard for them to invest so much money on that.
Right.
And I do for the tenant.
so you would be willing to have this doorway conform to the facade that is under,
Yes.
To be clear, he is matching the existing doors on the other side of the
Right, but
building.
it seems as if we're looking, well, no, I guess the Historic District Landmark Board was just like no door at all.
That's
So
right.
it did not matter.
That's right.
Thank you. What are the wishes of the council?
Mayor Pro Tem, I think that, could we, Mr. Guen, could we, propose to close and introduce, which would mean approving this with a contingency to approve, contingency to the approval of the actual door design? In other words, not just give the okay if we move this forward, but have an actual rendition of what it would look like, or is that the actual?
He has provided a rendition of he's provided the material.
Can we see that? What is the rendition? What is the material? It does match.
These are the materials, and it matches the doors that exist currently on the other side.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, you can't see it at all. Here you go. This is better, thank you.
There you go, that works.
Can you see? It's
Oh,
hard.
And
this one is better.
And just to be
Oh,
clear,
perfect. This is awesome, thank you.
just to be clear, the actual opening will not exceed more than what's needed for the actual door, right? In other words, it's not gonna, if the door's a 36-inch door, we're not gonna have an opening of, let's say, 48 because we wanna add a column or we wanna alter nothing. It's just the,
It's gonna be two window on the side and one opening of.
and it's all gonna match the Iturbide side.
Exactly, sir.
With that being said, Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to make a motion to close and introduce.
Condition?
Motion, second. All in favor?
May.
Councilman Figueroa, yes, ma'am.
May I amend? If, since it seems as if Mr. Herrero is amenable to having this door match the facade, now that would require either the Historic District or perhaps the Webb County Heritage Foundation to come in with an approved design. So it is not intended to make this more burdensome, but it is intended to have something that matches this facade. Understanding the doors on your front are different. But because the hesitation, because of the facade that exists, and the goal of the Historic District Landmark Board is to preserve the facades, then if we could ask you to agree to have a door that would match or be amenable to the facade that exists on that wall. It's different from the front of the building, this facade.
No. The front of the building, also each tenant, they painted it in their own color.
Right, but where you're proposing to put the door has an existing facade on that wall, on San Agustin.
I think, if I may, Councilmember, I think the Historic Land Board, I wouldn't bring in the Heritage Foundation because that's, I think, the county's authority. But if we go back to the Historic Landmark Board, I don't know, as it is, they don't want it, right? So I think we're going to create another issue now with, I personally think that aesthetically, if we now put a different door than what's on the Iturbide side of the building, I think it's going to look now weird.
Right.
And I wouldn't be in favor of that because I think it would look uniformed, right? I prefer personally that it be uniform with the Iturbide side, then now have a different type of door or color. And I get where Councilman Sierra is coming from, because ideally if there was an issue with not having to alter the existing facade, then maybe having a door with a frame that's the color of the brick to maybe blend in, or something to that effect, I would assume is what we would have a compromise to, but now I'm concerned that that would look different than the actual side of Iturbide, which then I think would look off, in my opinion, aesthetically.
Councilman Figueroa.
If you're willing to discuss alternative doorways, I would support contingent on.
Would that be your amendment, Mr.
Yes.
This one?
Quiero.
Yep. So, I'll accept the amendment because it is in Councilmember Cigarroa's district, and I do feel that her voice needs to be heard, and we need to figure out a solution to this. What we want you to understand is we're approving this for you, okay?
Appreciate it.
However, they do want you to go back to the drawing board and maybe with staff and Councilmember Cigarroa, so that there could be maybe a different type of door that would maybe blend in more with the actual facade. And if you're able to come up with something, right, then maybe we can get that approved. And if for whatever reason there isn't anything, then we'd probably move in this direction, right? But we do want to give the opportunity to find an alternative. And if that is the case, there's a possibility we may just go with what you have already, right? But if there's an alternative out there that may better suit the facade, then we would want for you to go with that option. So that is the motion on the floor.
We have a motion, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
And I would hope that maybe Mr. Knapp, that staff does get with him to explain to him what we just decided on and make it easier for him to move forward with his project. Okay?
Great, thank you very much. Public hearing number 2. Anyone wishing to speak? Thank you, sir. Anybody wishing to speak for or against? For or against? For or against?
I think all employees are lining up against the schedule, right? And the extra holiday. Motion to close and introduce.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Public hearing number 3. Anybody wishing to speak for or against? For or against? For or against?
Motion to close and introduce.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Public hearing number 4. Anybody wishing to speak for or against? For or against? For or against?
Motion to close and introduce.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Public hearing number 5. Anybody wishing to speak for or against? For or against? For or against?
Motion to close and introduce.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Public hearing number 6. Anybody wishing to speak for or against? For or against? For or against?
Motion to close and introduce. Unless the chief has something to say about, no, oh.
A motion, do I have a second? Anybody second that motion?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Council to introduce introductory ordinances 7 through 13.
Second.
Well, there's no motion, it's just an introduction.
Oh, sorry.
Councilwoman?
Poll 7?
Absolutely. We don't have to pull any because we just introduced, right? So we're not voting on anything, but we could hear the presentation.
Is it?
We vote next meeting, right? On all these items.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, Zone Win, for the record. I'm here to speak on ordinance number 7. We did some research, and the original motion from former council member Esteban Rangel was in April 4th of 2016, and I was the acting city secretary at the time, so that's why I remembered it. So there are 5 items proposed for you, and the reason why I'm bringing it up is because it's just something that's been ambiguous, and I like some guidance. Same thing that we did last year with the promotional funds, because there was a wish from my department and from me to have a brighter line, and it didn't work out, so we moved forward. So it's the same thing here. So in essence, there's 5 issues in this ordinance proposal. First is the including allowances. Again, I was there as the acting city secretary, even though I was, I've been board certified for 20 some odd years, since 2002. And when I heard it, I thought including allowances meant here's the increase in salaries and you also get allowances. But then there's a different interpretation that was here's your salary and that is inclusive of allowances, whether you get 2 allowances, 5 allowances, whatever, it still comes up to the same. So that's what was different back then. And then when I came back 2 years ago, it was raised again, and still it's being raised. So I'm here to seek guidance from you. Moving forward, do you want it to be a salary, which was established back in 2016, 50,000 for council members, 75 for mayor, and then just take out the including allowances so that you all can get allowances? And that's how it's generally done in other employers. where you get a base salary plus allowances if you're entitled to it. Okay, so that's the main one.
Well, let's,
Yes, go ahead.
before we jump to the next
Sure.
section,
Sure.
right? I think, a question that's out there, right, is it a salary change?
No.
And if it's because of the conflict of, not conflict, but rather, I guess, the interpretation of the charter versus your opinion, right? So the question is it a salary change, or is this a correction, or what are we calling it? Or how are you interpreting this?
There's different ways of looking at it. One, you can say, let's go back and see what the intention was back then, but then we're talking about 10 years of corrections. So I'm asking, I'm proposing to take out that, including allowances, so that it would be clearer. It means that you have your set salary at that amount, not set salary, possibly including allowances, possibly without allowances. So it is not a salary change because I'm not changing the number. I'm just taking out the allowance.
Who's first? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thanks. Okay. You mentioned, thank you, Zon. You mentioned not knowing what they meant back then. We're always talking about what did the founding fathers think of when they were writing such and such law. But I mean, for me, it's like kind of black and white that it says including allowances. That was the intention. And you know, it sounds like, you know, if you're taking out including allowances, then you would be leaving open the door for additional allowances on top of that, which would lead to a net increase in, you know, in gain. And I know some of the arguments, you know, for it, but you know, ultimately at the end of the day, this would be an increase in dollars in council members' accounts. So I think it would be, you know, an increase in something. I don't know if you call it something different than salary, but yeah.
I hear you, and I'm tired of mince words. I'm just saying that, yes, there would be a net increase in what's coming in your pockets. But my point is, I'm not asking from this to increase to 50,000, 75,000, or change that number. I'm just dealing with that allowance. Because I gotta admit, back then, I was sitting there, and I thought it meant one thing when somehow it meant something different.
But 8 years ago, you mentioned this was 8 years ago. So I guess I'm curious, like, so you have a lot I know you're very busy, so what, like, made you think, let me go back and think about where I was 8 years ago and what I was doing in the summer of 2016? Like, I mean, I guess it's kind of, it feels a bit out of nowhere, but anyway.
If I may answer that, it is not out of nowhere, because back then I was sitting there, I thought one thing, and then it was construed a different way. And Esteban Rangel was my former student at TAMU, so I went and asked him, and they said, let's go look at the minutes. And I thought that was just, you know, interpreted, again, my way, possibly a different way. But then there were other council members who voted, so I'm not sure what they thought. So then when I came back here 2 years ago, again, it's just something that's been on my mind, I gotta admit. This is the nerdy employment lawyer in me, but that I thought that was just something odd to say, inclusive, because then if you get 2 allowances, someone gets 3 allowances, but it still adds up to 50,000. Why go through that rigmarole? So that's why I thought it must not mean that, because otherwise you just say, this is your set salary, no matter what your allowances are. But again, I was asked for guidance, once and for all, so we move forward, and I can, you know, not get questions and be able to sleep at night. I don't know.
Go ahead.
So just to be clear, currently, because of the way it's been interpreted, council members earn $30,200 in salary and $19,800 in allowances. Just for council members, and the mayor is a little bit higher than that. His base salary, I think, is $50,000, and he earns about $25,000 in allowances.
If I may, that's if all of you get the same allowance. But if you somehow get no home office allowance, or someone else gets no car allowance, then it may change as far as your base and so forth.
Right, but
Because it still adds up to 50,000.
currently, we do not get reimbursed. Currently, we are just given the allowances. I understand removing it means that now it'll be reimbursed, and everyone needs to prove how much they spend for their cell phone, how much square footage they have for their home office,
Car allowances.
and how long they're using their car, or how much they use their car. But currently, we're just given those allowances up front. So our allowances are $19,800 and our salary is $30,200, and those add up to $50,000 a year. And again, the mayor's a little bit higher.
Yes.
So the proposal to remove including allowances means essentially $19,800 will be getting a raise from, because then the allowances are going to be on top of that $50,000 salary.
If you
This is
qualify.
just practically speaking. I'm not speaking to the intentions back then, right? So essentially $20,000 in addition to the $30,000 is about a 65% raise that we're being asked to give to ourselves without any input from the community. I understand that the language was one way and interpreted one way back then, but practically speaking, this is how we have been paid for all of these years. And now the suggestion is we get a $20,000 increase in pay, assuming that our allowances stay the same, right? Now maybe they go down a little bit because it'll be reimbursed. But essentially speaking, we're taking out the allowances from that salary and saying we're going to give you those $20,000 and the allowances will be on top of your $50,000. So it comes out to a 65% increase in council members' salaries without any input from the public. And this is where I have a problem, because other cities base it on either the median income for the city. I mean, cities can commit however much money they want to their city council members. That is true. But the way cities address it is very differently. Some tie it to the median income in their city. In Laredo, the median income is $26,818. Because now we're going to compare salaries to $50,000, right? In Charlotte, North Carolina in 2022, a pay hike went through a citizen advisory committee on governance. The San Antonio Council just discussed city pay hikes, city council members' pay hikes in August of so last month. And that was based on a recommendation from a committee that the city manager put together. And it will be going to referendum. So again, public input is part of this process. And there is an emerging trend to use an independent commission, because it is, I mean, giving yourself a raise without any input, it's just, in my opinion, not very ethical. And even looking at raising council member salaries, allowing voters to participate, whether we tie a salary increase to future council members getting voted into office, so that voters know that the council members they are supporting will get this increase in pay. And again, it's a way for the voters to contribute to that decision. This way, even though I understand it's correcting language, seems very much to me removing our voters from participating in this process and just voting to give ourselves a raise. And that makes me very uncomfortable.
If I may, it's just, again, I'm trying to tee up for y'all that there is this ambiguity there. As far as the raise, again, I don't believe that this is to ostensibly increase that number. However, I get that de facto there would be an increase, yes.
Practically speaking.
Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mayor. So I disagree, and also I agree with my fellow colleagues that this is an increase in salaries. I'm not sure why you're bringing this item forward and amending it when this wasn't previously a council discussion. If the intent back in the day is not what the ordinance is now, then they would have brought it forward back then to correct. And so I don't know why you're taking it upon yourself to not only increase our salary, but also include the cost of living adjustments, and I think there's a couple other items. But why, I mean, I understand that there are council members that were inquiring about this, and both for the city manager and yourself, this wasn't a council directive for you to amend.
You want me to answer?
And I think it should be on the record who's been inquiring about this.
Well, if I may, we have, in my department as well as other departments, we have brought forth staff recommendations, and it's just to tee it up. And my example is just last year when my office brought forth the promotional funds ordinance, and it was voted down, and so be it. Again, here is just an opportunity to clear things up.
But that was a council item about the promotional funds. We've talked about it at council previously, prior to you bringing up the recommendations.
Again, I believe that staff may bring up items is not only bound by what
Absolutely,
motions are.
but this is a serious matter involving voting to give ourselves an increase.
Mr. Neb, did you? Yeah, Mayor and City Council, if I can step in just a little bit as well too, because back in June or July, there was a conversation at the council level. It wasn't a directive, there wasn't no action on that, but it was talked about when the salary conversations do come up. It was talking about having the salary set at a level that teachers could actually stop their jobs and serve on the council. So I want to make sure that you understand that that was a conversation that did happen at a council meeting. I can go back and find the council meeting where it was happening. When I looked at this, and Zone and I have talked a lot about this thing, I believe that if we do not make the adjustment with including the allowances within this, I believe we have a conflict within item number 4 of this ordinance. Item number 4 says the members of the governing body shall be entitled to benefits on the same basis as all other city employees. That's the way it's currently written. The challenge we have is that, just like my salary as well too, my allowances are separate from my salary. It is not put into the salary. So if the nature of how this was set up was based upon that, we wouldn't have this conflict within that structure. I believe that every council member's salary is built out of 3 different things: the salary for the job, the benefits, which is the retirement, and then of course the allowances. So the allowances are actually, there's 2 different systems in here for the accountable plan and the non-accountable plan, where you can receive it as a reimbursable, and there's different reasons for why that reimbursable is in there, or you can receive it as a set amount. And depending on the nature of your personal lives is how they fit onto that scale as well too. But in my mind, either we adjust it by removing the including allowances within there, or we have to change and say that the members of the governing body are not entitled to the benefits as the same as all the other employees within the city. That, in my mind, those are the 2 distinctions within this piece of that puzzle. Our recommendation, based upon the conversations of council in the broadest sense, is that you are considered, in a lot of cases, an employee of the city. And so we treat you the same as employees of the city. Other than that, that's essentially the reason for these different changes of how we walk through that.
Mayor, really quick, I just
Go
want to, I understand that this keeps coming up but we are not employees. We are elected, and this is technically a part-time position. We don't have a public-facing office. We don't have staff that focus on policy or resident communications. And there are many needs that should be addressed first before adjusting this. We're not employees. We're elected officials.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
So I guess that in this consideration, I mean, we have, if the intent is to make us full-time employees, we have several members here who have full-time jobs. I mean, this, practically speaking, again, just looking at the practicality of it, this is a part-time position. That is how it's treated. That is how we run. People who have other jobs are able to apply for the position. So this idea that it's exclusionary to a broad swath of the public, I understand that not everybody can participate, but several people who have jobs are able to participate in this part-time elected position to make policy decisions and determine the direction of government. So I just find it incompatible with our ethics code to give ourselves a raise in this way. If we want to talk about creating these positions as full-time positions, then that is a conversation to have. If then I think if you're going to make it a full-time position, then you begin to consider, well, should it only be, like, should members be able to have another full-time position if they're sitting in this elected position? If we're going to raise it to that level, that's another conversation to have. It's a much longer discussion than I believe what we can have here now. And so if we're going to talk about it, then let's turn it over to a department, a committee, some form that elected officials can remove themselves from this conversation and have it be advised by people who study the issues, who compare it to other cities and what they do, who can look at when you would implement it, because it would be best to implement it when the people who are voting on it are not either are accountable to the public or are no longer here. You know, there needs to be some practicality to giving ourselves a 65% pay raise based on adjusting language, in my opinion.
Go ahead, Council.
Mr. Gwen, have you, because you already mentioned former council member Esteban Rangel multiple times. Have you ever asked him what his intention was, or?
Yes.
And
I
what
asked
has
him
he
back
told
then,
you?
you know.
And most recently, have you discussed this with him?
It's the same, he cannot remember very well, and he goes back to the minutes, but the minutes just say that, you know, including the allowances. And if I may, I'm going into my third year. A lot of people didn't think I was going to make it 3 months, and now here I am. So my initiative at this level is to deconflict, you know, fill in the blanks and gaps of ordinances and try to update ordinances. So this is just one of my attempts. It's not my baby, but again, this is the primary issue, but then there's some other parts in this particular section that, as far as there's 5 total that I'd like to raise to you for
Mayor,
consideration.
I know that, if I may redirect, this is an important item for discussion, as my colleagues have mentioned. The item on the agenda is simply an introductory ordinance, and we're not voting or doing anything tonight, right? We're simply, this is, I guess, for lack of better words, a public notice of it coming for a vote next meeting, right? So I think that between now and the next meeting, it gives those council members or all of us an opportunity to discuss this in depth with Mr. Nab or with Mr. Gwen, and have the discussion we're having tonight, in 2 weeks, right? When we either vote on this or kill it or approve it or do whatever it is we're going to do. But there's really no action that we can take tonight. It's just a public notice, and it will come back in 2 weeks, and that is when a vote could be called for, right, if I'm not mistaken, for any of these introductory ordinances.
But if I may, I'd like to just explain the 5 changes, if I may, just so you all can hear it. Okay, so first and foremost is just what that meant, including allowances. Second is the cost of living adjustment, because things, as we've been beneficial to, there's been some cost of living adjustments for employees, and if you're an employee, then you should be able to benefit from the cost of living adjustments as well in the future, as opposed to waiting for this monumental change in your salary. So, and then third is this applicable hourly rate. In the past, whenever council members had to leave town and so forth, and they had to forfeit some hours from their employment, they can get reimbursed, but there's differences in, you know, someone who is gainfully employed at a high level versus someone that's self-employed versus someone that is not employed. So I propose using the applicable hourly rate. Like for council members, it's $50,000 divided by 2080 a year, so it's $24.04. That would be your rate. And for the mayor, it'd be $36.06. That would be his or her rate. and that would be consistent. Next would be, because if we do it salary and then allowances separately, then the allowances for vehicles and so forth need to be justified as opposed to just a direct stipend. And the last one, and this is the reason why this is coming up as an introductory ordinance, because we're exactly 9 weeks from the election, is on section 11, proposing that council member terms start no earlier than January 1, just for consistency purposes. The state has that, county has that, but for the city, after an election is canvassed and a candidate is qualified, then the person can be sworn in, and there's been some differences between, November versus December versus a runoff versus whatever. So this is just one option for y'all to have terms start January 1. And those are the differences.
Did you have a question, Councilman? No. All right.
We'll bring this back next week.
All right.
Come back next week for second.
We'll come back over that.
Could we begin to think about the citizens committee? Because again, it's gonna come back, it's still gonna be council discussing it. And I stand on the fact that we need public input, I believe, because I understand the adjustment in language, but practically speaking, it's a raise. And if we're gonna discuss councilman salary raises, I believe we should have public input in that process.
Go ahead.
Saying that we're involving a former councilman Rangel, well, we can reach out to him, or any council member can reach out to him and just ask him what his intent with all this. Why was he, put this motion, this ordinance into practice and see, qué va a salir de aquí, okay, por qué lo está haciendo. So that's what we're trying to figure out. Why are we doing it? Why did he put it in there? Why did he do it? We can all reach out to him, where he is at Loretto College, work right now for Loretto College, so I know we can reach out to him and ask him, what's the reason you did all this? So I think you already did, Mr. Nguyen. I think my fellow, colleagues can reach out to him, ask him straight out, like, hey, why was the reason, what was the intent you tried to do this? So, and that's what I'm saying.
Again, that's one avenue, just, again, I would not want to open up, 10 years of adjustments.
Right.
So possibly, if you're gonna go forward, that would be a easier solution.
All right.
Mayor, may I go ahead and move for the public committee?
It's not an action item.
Yeah, I know. All right, thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Next
Mr.
item.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve final reading of ordinances number 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And all these final readings, says just for purpose of the record, had already been, in a way, approved by council, right? They just come back, because I did see some zone changes and stuff, right? It's just the final reading to give the public an opportunity to speak on these, correct? Right, so the final reading of ordinances is something we already approved, and this is just like ministerial, giving the public one more chance to.
Yes.
Motion to approve consent agenda item 25, 26, and 27.
Motion second, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes.
Motion to approve items 28 and 29.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor? Opposed? Motion passes.
Item number 30, Mr. Neb, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Laredo, Texas, urging the Texas Legislature to enact legislation that provides border cities with the necessary tools to thrive and continue contributing to the state's prosperity, including but not limited to additional funding for border communities, combining or amending the sports venue and 4B taxes, and amending the 3.5% budgetary growth cap. So, would you have a presentation about these
I
items?
just have 3 slides to kind of cover, and Mayor and City Council, and I wasn't here when we went to Austin 2 years ago. I came in right at the tail end of that. But just so you're aware, Representative Raymond has reached out, and he says, if there is any legislation that you want the state to tackle for the benefit of the city of Laredo, please let me know. And it kind of triggered that we should be having this conversation and we should have had it a lot earlier than today. But I'm bringing forward some recommendations as to some very big items. And I know I've spoken with at least one of you about one additional item. But in my mind, if we are not asking the state legislature for help and for assistance in what we're challenged with, that we're a growing community, we're a border community, we have all these different types of needs. We feel like we're behind the 8 ball all the time. We're doing as much as we can on our own. And we believe that because of our economic driver of being on the border of the #1 port, and I love the one that's Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
We're the #1 port in the Western Hemisphere, not just the nation anymore. And but when you look at that, the challenges we have is that we have infrastructure problems, we have water, we have sewer, we have all these needs that we don't get to be recognized for because there is a population-based system as to how the funding gets formulated through the state. Throw into it a couple other items in here. We've had the conversation on the 4A, 4B tax, and I'll share that in a second here as well too. And so, and then we have these property tax caps that were initiated in 2019 because our legislature says we don't want our property taxes to grow very quickly. The problem is a community that is growing at the pace that we are, and there's more of us out there than that. If we're locked at a 3.5% increase in property tax, we're going backwards, not forwards. And so through that conversation, and let me share the 3 recommendations that I had to kind of start our resolution with. The first one is an increase in infrastructure funding for the border cities. That's recognizing the significance of our economic impact to the state and the nation. In my mind, I think we should be getting something more from the state as far as our economic driver status with that in order to keep up. Our infrastructure is based upon population, and we're locked into that. And we all know that, I think Councilmember Cigarroa is the one that says that we're punching above our belt. We're a force to be reckoned with. We're 260,000 population, but we probably have over 300 to 350,000 people here that we are serving on a regular basis. Those discrepancies in the population are a big thing. So I believe that we should be asking the state for some type of an assistance outside of that population model because of all the needs we are. And I think this text this talks about for the region, we've got $1.5 billion coming in over the next, whatever the period of time is. And I'm telling TxDOT that's not enough. We're not keeping up with our infrastructure. We need additional assistance, and it's only going to get more active for us in the next 5 to 10 years. That's what we believe. So in my mind, I think we should be asking Representative Raymond, Senator Zaffarini, to take forward some ideas that we help them with in order to advance additional funding sources. It's my understanding that Texas is talking about $20 billion in reserves. They are putting aside a lot of extra money, and it's my understanding it's going to continue to grow. Put that money to work. That's what I'm asking to do, and I believe that the border is the right place for that. The second item, as we talk about the sports venue tax of the 4A, 4B, and this was vetoed by the governor at one point when we did take it back to them. But what we did was we asked for the legislation to just make a legislative adjustment and allow us to do a 4A, 4B and just convert over to that. Within this recommendation is that it's just a conversion off of that. Sports venue tax and the 4B side of the 4A, 4B are very similar uses, whether it be convention centers, whether it be sports venues, all of those things, they're very similar in nature. And so because they're so similar, my recommendation then here is we go back to the legislature and we again ask for the ability to change our sports venue tax over to a 4A, 4B tax. But I've also added, because we learn over time, and since the governor vetoed, said, well, unless you have something going on, the 4A, 4B tax, the sports venue tax, are all approved by the voters as when we establish. I would like to put in a piece in there that says, we go back to the voters and say, can we convert the sports venue tax to a 4A4B? And if the legislature will allow that, I think any cities that have went down one path and believe the other path is better for them will be allowed to go back to their people and make that change. There's an Attorney General opinion out there that states that they don't want to remove the will of the people. So if the vote was for one or the other, they want to meet that expectation. All I'm saying is let's go back to the voters and allow us to move it, because we're not talking about, we're just going to move the debt over. The numbers don't change, the amounts are the same. It's just that right now we're going to take care of what we're doing there. So in my mind, I think we ask for the flexibility to be able to change from our sports venue to the 4A, 4B, or vice versa, depending on what the community is. The last item is to modify revenue caps for the faster growing cities. And this is to provide an allowance, and I had some suggestions in my background paperwork that's in the packet, but to provide an allowance for the cities that are experiencing rapid growth that are exceeding the 3.5% property tax cap. Because they've capped it at that, and we're growing faster than that, the cost of our services are increasing, putting more of a weight on our current taxpayers, because we can't capitalize upon the growth that we're seeing. And so the idea is that we go back and we ask the legislature, and my understanding is we will end up getting, excuse the technical terms, but we will get our butt kicked on this one because the aversion of the state. But if we don't ask, I don't believe we have stand a chance. And so the idea is to give them some options, because we're not the only ones in the boat. Any other city that's in the state that is growing faster than this are affected the same way. And so our recommendation was with that.
Oh, Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was waiting for you to be on that item in particular. I was trying to respect your presentation, but and you kind of just alluded to my concern, is that all of Texas is growing, right? It's not like,
Yep.
Yes, we're important. We believe that wholeheartedly.
Yes, sir.
But we're not unique in growth as far as Texas goes in population, right? San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston. So I guess my point is, yes, seems like Texas has made it clear on their 3.5% cap. That's really hard for cities to balance budgets when you have 6-7% inflation and we're capped at 3.5%. Forces us and you to be creative in the budget that you present to us that's balanced. Thank you. Good job. Thank you, sir. I guess if we're going to have to get really creative and specific on an exclusion, and of course, if we want an exclusion, a lot of other cities will find a reason, because otherwise, every other city's having to go out for bond referendum election, like Dallas just did with $1.25 billion in May of this year. Like we're going to be pursuing in May of 2025, because that's what cities are forced to do now.
Right.
It's the only way to pay for things, because we're capped by the state. So I hope we have some, I hope we just don't go and say, please give us more than 3.5%, and then expect them to say no, and then ready to walk back home, without that, solution. So I guess I'm just saying, I hope we can be working with Representative Raymond over these next 4, 5, 6 months as the session gets started to actually have an idea that might actually lead to some results. So I appreciate the point. I hope that we're not just going there expecting defeat.
And let me go off of that a little bit, Mayor and City Council. And so, yeah, a couple different pieces there is that I got the opportunity to go to the TML's District 7 meeting. We're a member of that group. This was just last week. TML is working on trying to find solutions to this matter as well too. So we're not out there alone. We're not asking for that. But I was trying to remember exactly another piece on that thing, because I think we have to make sure they understand what that impact is on us. The challenge is not really the brick and mortar, because we can go to bond referendum with our people and ask for them to do brick and mortar. The problem we have is that we can't increase the operational side. So we have a need right now of about 3 fire stations. So it's not the 3 fire station building. We can build them fairly simply through a vote of our people. The problem is that now I need to figure out how I'm going to man it and equip it with equipment. And that's going to have the impact on our budget that is increased over a 3.5% increase in any of our budget. And that's the challenge we have with that struggle, is that it's the operational costs that are gonna hurt as trying to figure out how to absorb. So the conversation with budget right now, depending on how successful we are during the bond referendum in May of 2025, if we go forward with that, that's going to be the brick and mortar side. We then have to close the gap, and we have to build in a way that we can absorb it on the operational side for all of our general fund services.
Mayor, sorry. And so this is a question, I guess, for perhaps Zone. Like right now, it's not allowed legally to go out for bond for operational stuff, only for brick and mortar. Has that ever been tried or tested or attempted in the legislature in the past, or not that you would know everything off the top of your head, but I'm just, is that something we can request for, like going out to?
It required change, yes. That's
state law change.
And it may be the request to do that to ourselves as well,
But
too.
we say, citizens, please vote for this
That's
brick and
right,
mortar,
for
but
an
also
operational
vote
increase.
for the chance for us to
Yeah,
raise.
rather than just a bond on that, we increase for an operational side. And I'm not sure if the legislature allows for that or not. I think the nature of what I wanted to do, because I'm not sure the last time that this city council has put forward a combined, cohesive approach and said, city or state, we need your help, and this is the way we want to do that. So I am asking, at least based upon that, that you consider adoption of a resolution seeking changes in the statutes to allow for either these recommendations, or if you have others, and then that you direct city management and appropriate departments to send a copy of the resolution and the background information to TML and local state senator and representatives.
Second. I have a question.
All right, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if it's a question or a comment so much. So I think the whole 3.5% property tax cap was because the Republican administration wanted to show democratic cities, you are spending too much money on your social programs, so, cut your social programs and your operations, and we're gonna make you do it so that you're not raising taxes on our friends. I'm filling in a little bit, but there was some, it seemed to me, punitive attention to that when it came out. And I think reframing the conversation to talk about, if we're growing, and like you said, we need maintenance and operation for these public safety measures. We need maintenance operation to make sure we have people to make our roads and increase the infrastructure that we need for our growing port. If we can present that I think in a more realistic way, but also change that narrative that serves us well. And we should be demanding from our state government the tools that we need to help our city grow and help the residents that live here enjoy better quality of life. So I'm in favor of this.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback and dump a little bit more on that. Mayor, we are $380 billion run through our city into the nation. And that, in my own mind, says that we should be able to do whatever it is that we're necessary. And I'm sorry, but Laredo is part of its social programs are built into us as well too, and their operational side. So in my mind, I think we just have to make our voices heard a little bit louder than we've done in the past. And I'm hoping to help, so.
Mayor?
We have a motion? Second. All in favor?
Well, I just wanted to ask a couple questions regarding the 4A, 4B item. So the comprehensive plan and the economic development strategy adopted by the city in September 2017 identified steps necessary for the creation of a type 4B. Why are we looking at following those steps, or why not?
All right, so in the conversation of where we were at with the conversation on sports venue and trying to figure out how to convert it over. In that conversation, we covered that based upon where we are at now, we have to cover the costs. And so sports venue tax provides operational costs in the arena, the Unitrade, and the upcoming Bella Vista Sports Complex. It'll cover some of those operational costs there. On top of that, we have the debt out there of the Bella Vista Sports Complex. So we have to satisfy that debt. If we're going to move to a 4A, 4B, we go to a vote of the people for 4A, 4B. And so we're going to end up having to satisfy all of the costs that are associated within the sports venue tax, which means we have to find a way to absorb all the operational costs of those facilities in our current budget to remove that from the sports venue tax. Then we have to find a way to absorb the capital improvements that are already issued within the sports venue tax. We have to satisfy all of that. Then we have to go back to the people and say, are you willing to establish a 4A, 4B? So we have to close out the sports venue, as the way it's been explained to me, is we have to close out the sports venue, and then we have to go back and ask the people for a 4A, 4B. What I'm saying is that rather than to clear out all that debt, all that costs that are already right now, I would rather go back to the people and say, do you believe that we should have this economic benefit tool of the 4A, 4B rather than the sports venue? Because the sports venue was a very specific purpose of doing with the sports complex. And the people did vote for it. So when you talk about the will of the people, they did vote for it. But I don't think we ever put forth the option at that point in time. The option came later in further conversations, right? And so in my mind, I think that's what I was trying to find, was a way that we don't have to eliminate that tax and then go back to the people and say we want a new one. I would rather say, can we convert this one so that we don't have to find the way to absorb all of that cost within our current system? Because as I've tried to explain right now, is that we're not keeping up with what we have to get done in all of those services. And that'll be the weight. If it's not paid for through the sports venue tax, it's going to be covered by property tax, sales tax, and those other costs. And so in my mind, it was better to ask for that possibility of an exemption and just convert it. And we tried to do it, but we tried to do it in a legislative way without the people's voice. And we talked about people's voice tonight. So in my mind, I think if we can justify the reason why we want to move from a sports venue to a 4A, 4B, that allows us the ability to utilize the 4A and 4B as we continue to grow and develop and we increase our capacity. Now that opens up for all of the things that are on the 4A side of that 4A, 4B, which is, I think, the intent and the spirit of what we were aiming for to try to get to the 4A, 4B.
Thank you. But,
All right.
have we ever done a feasibility analysis on lowering the sports venue sales tax?
Not to that limit, because the challenge is that even with this year's budget, we tapped into our reserves by about $25, $28 million. And if we keep going in that nature, because we are trying to hold our services at that level, there will not be the capacity to absorb all that sports venue and keep up with what we're doing. There will be some very austere moments within our structure and hard conversations about what services we provide and what services we don't provide if we try to reduce it down. We can go through that analysis, happy to do that financial analysis as to how we would do that, but it will affect a lot of the other pieces that we are currently doing as well too. And I'm happy to put that together if necessary, but my hope was to find the path of least resistance and move from one point to the other without jeopardizing anything that we're currently doing.
I just have
Yep.
one follow-up, and I appreciate the attempt. I do, I would like to motion for the analysis because I don't want us to get to where this may be denied, and then we still don't have any information to work with.
And I would say that the challenge we're going to have is that if we can't get anything to adjust, we're going to have some of those conversations anyway, because we're going to have to figure out the balance of how we're going to make the revenues and expenses always match.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Go ahead. Yeah.
You said we tapped into the reserves. How much How much was it in the reserves and how much did we tap into? What's the
I will have to get you those numbers. I don't have those numbers at the top of my head. We did during budget, but I kind of lost that a little bit. But in the conversation with budget, we have the possibility there of possibly 2 to 3 years of, to keep trend. If we stay with the trend, we'll start hitting that limit there unless we do some adjustments. And so in my mind, there's about 2 to 3 years that we're going to start adjusting our expenditure model in order to kind of pull that in there. And, I think it's really funny, or that's not funny, haha. But it is really difficult because we tell our departments every year to hold your expenses at zero. But every year we have to increase every one of our departments because we can't keep up otherwise. And so the challenge is that we're going to have to look at a lot of different things. In my mind, the 2 to 3 years that we believe we have, we'll be looking very heavily at our rates and our fees for all of our services. We'll be looking at any of those ways to conserve money, to change our structure, to eliminate services that we are really not supporting our population. We get rid of some of those services, and we'll keep it focused on the things that really matter. But that'll be our future conversations as we walk into the next few years. Is that we're going to be focusing on these different pieces. And some of you already see some of the within my reports and everything, some of the informational pieces, so you're aware of what we're doing on that. I mean, our incentive programs are meant to have something good happen that will bring back our assessed value. Now, my only concern now with assessed value is that if we can't get to recognize that assessed value because of the caps, it doesn't do us any good to increase our assessed value. But really quickly, just answering that question, we believe that we're in 2 to 3 years for sure. I expect that through every conversation we have with every budget, we will try to nudge that a little bit to buy a little bit more time, because over time we can shift the model. Give me 40 acres, I'll turn the truck around, right? That's the concept that at least we have in our mind.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
Would you like to hear this one too? Because I think you need to.
Go ahead.
All right. And yeah, so it's like these are two things that are pretty exciting for what we've been working on. All right, so we are gearing up based upon the council's decision during budget and everything to do a bond referendum committee. We talked about that. What I'm bringing forward to you is that I had the opportunity to sit down with a UISD superintendent, a retired one, and said, how do you guys do that? Because the schools had to find a way. LISD, UISD, they lean on bond referendums continuously in order to do their capital. We've had this system that we've had where we just roll over our funding, right? And so for the last 22 years, we've been able to reduce our tax rate, our property tax rate, on our own. We did not need the state to help us reduce our property tax rate. I'm just saying. But we are going out to ask the public to help us with some of this capital improvement stuff. So what we are recommending, again, is to incorporate as many people, and that is 28 members on this full committee. City Council would appoint 3 representatives each. The mayor would appoint 4 plus the one that serves as the committee chair. We would run this committee or task force all the way through a month after the election, because if we do go forward with the election, then we want to keep them on board for the lessons learned and the process that we have. So with that, and this came out of a council discussion as well too, so we're going to have this overall committee of 28, and we're going to break them into 4 different subcategories: public safety, public infrastructure, enhancement services, and health and wellness. We'll put 7 members of each one of our main committee on this as 7 members, and then the subgroup will select their chair. But we will take every one of our departments that are putting together these plans, these operational plans, these capital plans, and we will run them through the correct subgroup in order to be assessed by our citizens as far as what we want to accomplish. Timeline, this is another piece within that document. I am hoping that by the next meeting of the city council, that we have all our representatives on there, because we want to have our initiation meeting with that group before October 1.
Right.
We are already tight on the schedule. Yes, sir.
Before we go on, for the members, do we choose where, can we go back to the next slide?
Yep.
Yeah. Do we choose where do we want to put the committee member that we chose for that public, like for public safety?
If you wanted to, we can do it that way. If you have very specific people in mind, happy to put them exactly where they are. I think the challenge you have is that there's 4 groups, and each one of the council members are selecting 3. So if you want to say, I would like them on which one of these, I would say that we would want to split you all up to a certain level, so that there is representation from every district, at least on every group. So yeah, I think if you have very specific people that can fit that, there's nothing wrong with that. And we'll try to meet all of that, but we do want to keep it to 7 on each group so that we can move and move forward faster. So September 24, we have the formation of the committee. October through December, these subgroup meetings will meet with our departments. They will hold town hall meetings or public meetings where we can talk about our plans and our efforts are going to happen in that. What we hope to do is that the full committee, even though they're meeting on a monthly basis just to keep track of all this work, but in January, they'll come back together with all the recommendations, and then between January and February, they will put together what would be recommended to the city council. And again, just like charter revision, we will put together all the information, regardless of if it was a great idea or a bad idea. We'll bring that information because at the end of the day, the city council will establish the direction forward of how we would do a bond referendum. One of the things about doing the 4 different sections is it's almost don't put all your eggs in one basket, because it means different things for different people, each one of these things. So if the majority of the people believe that public safety is the most important thing, they can vote for that one. But maybe public infrastructure, I'm going to say that one's probably a good one too, but public infrastructure is not as important. If the public votes down any section of this, we might be able to get at least 1 to 4 of these different categories and move the city forward for that area. Then we can go back and look at trying to figure out how to do it otherwise. February is the final review and the approval of any bond package recommendation for the full committee. We are using, just so you know, February 14th is the end date of all. Valentine's Day, just so you know, if you can't remember what 14th is. But in my mind, I think based upon what Mr. Maldonado and what we believe out of legal and everything, is that middle of February, we have to have our package ready so that it can be submitted to the election board for that. And then February through April, February through April, we want to start a public outreach and education campaign led by a private committee. Just so you know, it's just like the charter revision as well too. Once you have done your work, once you have set the direction, we are no longer allowed to advocate or go against anything that came out of the city council. It is up to the public at that point in time. So the idea is to establish a group for this and that would serve as that citizen group, a champion, a cheerleading squad, whatever you want to call them, in order to have that conversation. This is the same product. No, we cannot, because we have to allow the public to determine at that point in time. We got to talk about it all the way up until you take that vote and say, this is our package. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, just to clarify, you're saying the city cannot necessarily, but for example, we as individual council members who have campaign funds,
yes,
we can use that money to individually to promote causes we believe in.
Yeah.
Like if I want to promote the fact that maybe a rec center for District 6 will be potentially included in this, I would be able to promote that.
Yes.
Using campaign funds.
The way it's been explained to me is that privately they can set up a PAC, for lack of a better way, a public action committee of some type. It can be set up. It has to be independent of the city. It cannot be the city. It cannot be that. But I would say that the citizen nature of our committee, as well as the lessons learned through the school districts, this is the way to get the word out so that everybody understands what we're trying to accomplish, so.
May I just clarify?
Yeah, go
The
ahead.
zone, for example, like, if, let's say, there's the rec center proposition that might come up, right? And it's proposition 6. I just want to clarify, I believe that I, as a council member, just like the mayor of Dallas was promoting his 10 propositions just in May for 1.2, he was promoting it as the 3 Ps, public safety, potholes, and parks. He was promoting it. Okay, so I don't see why we as individual council members and the mayor would not be able to be promoting things that we believe would be good. I mean, I understand maybe from our official city, hey, I'm talking social media, for example. You know,
No, but you can advocate for it because you're proposing it, yes. But the line is we can't like force our employees to vote a certain way, you know.
There are different attorney general opinions out there that they provide good guidance, I think, within this structure. And so we'll be able to share some of that stuff as well too, because we just don't want to step on any landmines or create that ability for somebody to argue that we've done something improper. And so but I think we can get you through all of that. Really quickly, meeting schedules. Of course, the full committee will start at the end of September with monthly meetings through February. Subgroups will meet bi-weekly if needed. Additional meetings if they are needed, and then any special meetings. Again, once we set up the committee, all we're going to do is serve as liaison. We're going to just kind of help keep the work going, and we're going to let them determine their time frame. They just need to know that the clock is ticking for whatever that.
Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Neves, quick question. Can we have ISD members on that committee?
Yes.
Saying that they know how the referendum works and how bond works. Can we have them in that committee?
Yeah, Mayor and City Council, I believe they would have to be your representative. The way I've set up this committee is that we would not have ex officios on there as well too, but they could be your committee members as well too. And there is no restriction in my mind on this committee because we didn't put any restrictions on it as to who you wanted to choose in order to satisfy the requirement for having 3. Really quickly with the staff liaisons, again, we'll establish city staff. I haven't talked to any of the departments yet as to who those staff liaisons are, but more than likely it'll be the finance department that will be serving. They now know, as of my statement right there, that we'll use them as staff liaisons. And then we will assign a subgroup of liaisons just to help keep that movement through the city for that. Finally, just for the responsibilities of the departments in providing a recommended plan, because all of our departments have been working on their different pieces going forward. They're going to submit a comprehensive project proposal aligned with the strategic goals, ensure that everything is there. We're going to walk through the cost estimates, funding estimates, and everything. My fear with anything is put across, it should meet 5 to 7 years of construction. So that whatever we're going to build in the next 5 to 7 years, and the bond referendum actually allows us to take the debt out for 20 years. Just really quickly, these were some of the areas that we had, and I've shared this with you before with some of these numbers. These are numbers that are based upon different criteria right now. I expect that they will all clean up as we do this. But public safety, streets, parks and recreation, arena improvements, unfunded liabilities, pediatric services, downtown revitalization, Hamilton Hotel, water park at the Buena Vista, the binational riverfront on the riparian improvements and water quality, El Metro, because we did not receive that recent grant, we may have to do some of that work independently, so we wanted to at least consider that. New recreation centers, convention center, and then I did talk to the airport because I think the airport will do a presentation as well too, because we can't do the terminal improvements with the federal funding that we see if it doesn't rank as well as fixing a taxiway. And so all those pieces in there. The public involvement, we want the committee of itself to host at least 2 public hearings, and I'm assuming that'll be in December and January to gather input. And there will also be, because it is an ordinance for City Council, there will at least be 1 public hearing at City Council. And then, of course, always that the minutes and the reports will be kept transparent. So my action recommended is that the city council ask to consider adoption of the bond referendum plan and begin providing the names. We did some of them tonight. I would like the rest of them at the next council meeting based upon the criteria that we've just discussed. And I would really like to start this process.
Councilmember, go ahead.
Can we go back to the slide on slide number 8? So public safety is including fire and police?
It'll be fire, police, and 911 communications, anything of that realm of need is in it. Right now, this number is actually determined based upon police and fire needs, and actually, this is a reduced police need based upon what was presented. Police actually presented a $225 million need overall with where they were at. Fire department was asking for the 3 fire stations, and then we'd have to.
So, Mr. Neves, why is the reason that we removed from public safety from the police and?
Well, when we initially started talking about these numbers, we were trying to keep them kind of even within the structure. Because if we go heavy one side or another, we might miss some of those pieces. In my mind, the plans that we received from police and fire early were a 10-year plan. And I've asked them to pull back to a 5 to 7 year plan. And so the idea was to tighten all of that up. So there was a tightening up of these are just pretend numbers right now. What we are going to deliver to our committee is essentially the full package. And everybody will go back and adjust that. So please don't get locked into these numbers. These numbers are based upon some really quick assumptions and estimates of.
So these numbers can change further on?
They can change, they can go up or down, depending on what we do. What we're hoping is that the committee is going to kind of serve as that check and balance and pull things into perspective. Because this is almost $800 million worth of capital improvements if you took all these numbers right here. Just so you know, that is approximately 22 cents per 100 of an increase in taxes. I don't think anybody wants to get to that level. No. And so the idea is to pull this down into a manageable four category type bond referendum and say, these are the most important needs today. That doesn't mean that we don't go back 5 years from now or whenever later and say, well, now we need help with this.
Mr. Neves, Mayor, Mr. Neves, quick question. Have we reached out to the ISD to see if we can get some help on how the referendum, how the referendums work? Or how they go through it?
No, not a problem with that at all. Yeah, I know I had lunch with just one of the retired superintendents, and they said this is what we walked through in order to get there. I'm assuming it was connected to the individual that set the meeting up, and that's why we had.
We actually have two. We have Mr. Morales and Ms. Garcia. So.
Yeah, and the idea is to follow the pattern of what they have to do, because they have to do it, right? Yeah. In order to move forward, we found a model that we can continue to plot along. We're just not making headway, is what I'm saying.
Dr. King?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'd like to make a motion to approve the presentation and the request from the city manager with the amendment of at least 4 public hearings instead of 2.
Second.
Motion, second. All in favor?
Discussion.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch on the convention center because you have it listed as a convention center for 17.5 million, but my understanding from our discussions is that there's convention centers, there's civic centers, and there's another type of center. Will this be discussed and determined, or has somebody already made the decision?
No. Every one of these items that are on here are based upon that conversation that we've had at council to some level. The convention center, we had a long conversation about that when we talked about sites of where it would go. What I will tell you, though, is that we were all aligned that we need a convention center of at least 45,000 square feet, not a civic center. We believe that we have other resources for civic centers. So the idea is that we need a convention center that's large enough to bring in those mid to larger size groups. I think we have the spaces for the smaller size. So that's the only reason why we put that on there. And in my mind, that will be the topic of the conversation on there as to whether or not, even the viability of that project makes it through our citizen committees going, because we're all the ones that have to pay for this, right?
Right.
And so the idea is to try to make sure that the things we go after are the things that we need the most.
Councilmember King, yes, sir.
If I may explain why I'm requesting the 4 is because I've seen the way other cities do it, and there's sometimes 6 to 8 to 10 public meetings on these things, and I understand our timeline is a bit tighter than we'd like it, you know. So, and I know there's a lot to do in a short amount of time, but I just think this is, you know, I think it's too important to only have 2, and you know, people are busy. Like, we just want to, the last thing we want is for the public saying that we tried to rush this through and sneak it past them. So we need as many opportunities as we can. You know, maybe we even divide those 4 up into different categories. Not limited to those, if people want to come and talk about something else, but to try to take them in bites, perhaps, with these public hearings. You know, just, we want people to know that we're listening, that we want their opinion. We're not, this is not some like Christmas wish list. This is something all other major cities are doing. We're always comparing ourselves to places like McAllen and their convention center. How did they get their convention center? The voters voted on it in a bond referendum election. How do all these other cities do these things in a state that maxes 3.5% property? That's what they do. That's the only way to get big things done is through this, because of the way the state of Texas handcuffs us. So this is not like us being careless. This is something that should have been done more often since this 3.5% cap was put in place back in, I think, 2017. Laredo should have been doing this before. Not that we would go this big every so many years, but it's a tool that we have to use in the environment we have in the state of Texas. Like, with the growth that we have, we have no option.
Councilwoman Liz Figueroa.
Thank you. So this is a very aggressive timeline. You're recommending that there are bi-weekly subgroup meetings and monthly meetings of full committees between October and December, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's 3 meetings per, 3 meetings a month. Will they be allowed to participate via Zoom, online?
I would say we'll take in the information. I don't think we will be against the online. The idea, though, the transparency is to make sure that we do have a quorum of our group available. Just like you guys, people can come online, and yeah, I'm happy to broadcast these things any way we can, because these meetings, if we do them right, serve partially as a public hearing as well too, right? It's just not very specific on that thing. So the nature of this is to pull back the curtain and say, here's what we're working on and here's how we're working on it. And it's a very aggressive schedule, but in my mind, I think, you know, and we'll get better at this as we move along. And so I'm so thankful of the time we have, but it's really still tight on time frame.
Why are we choosing May and not the following November?
We can go that route. Based upon the conversation in the council, we talked about a November option and a May option.
I thought it was this November or May.
It was.
Yeah.
And this November, you were able to all see that how are we going to put together a very transparent package in a month? Impossible. And so the idea was, and we had to have it done by August 19th, I think. We had to have it done in order to get it onto the election. There was not enough time in order to do it justice.
Right. No, I'm just saying.
So that's why we went from option 1 for the November election to option 2, the May election. Happy to have the conversation with you, and if you believe that any of this stuff should be moved farther, the nice thing is that if all the work gets done, you'll have all the tools you need in order to determine when and if to initiate any of this to the public.
Councilmember King?
Wait, I still have the.
Go ahead,
So all of the meetings will be open to the Open Meetings Act?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Yeah, the whole idea is to keep this thing as open as possible because we are short on window of time, and I'm happy to add, I got a couple ideas on a couple extra public hearings within there to make them worth the time that we put them out there. I believe that we can lean on PIO a lot to put out blurbs and pieces as well too, because we want this, well, along with the committee, our staff will not be sleeping until we get through this thing either, just so you know. We're gonna all work on this thing together for that purpose, so that you have all the information you need to make the best decision.
Councilmember King, go ahead.
Thank you. And yeah, just to clarify, it's, you know, because if we do it in May of '25, that gives us time to prepare for the August budget workshops if it passes for fiscal year 25-26. If we did wait all the way till November of '25, then we wouldn't be able to even budget for it until August of '26, going into '26-27. So that's, I mean, because when we first started talking about this, I mean, I think me personally, I knew that November of this year was obviously not going to be possible. May, when we talked with Mr. Hinojosa, our financial advisor, you know, he said that May 25, although tight, is realistic, reasonable. It's still tight though, and I mean, I understand, I hear that concern, but I think you're setting up a plan. I just encourage all my fellow council members. I applaud Councilmember Torres for putting his 3 on tonight, and I believe the mayor, someone else put one. Alyssa Figueroa, council member. So I just encourage all of us, the rest of us, to get our 3 before the next council meeting in 2 weeks. I know, you know, I've been thinking about it for several weeks and just put, you know, a lot of good thought into it, and you know, I think we're going to get a good committee together.
Okay. Thank you so much. Got a motion, a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes.
Mayor Pro Tem, we need
Yes.
to, also, that was item number 31, we need to approve item number 30.
Do the motion.
A motion to approve item number 30.
Second.
Was it already approved?
30 was already approved. Okay.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
I do not remember it being approved, but okay. All right, so.
Motion to approve number 32, 33, 34, and 35.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Motion to approve number 36, 37, 38. Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Motion to approve number 39 and 40. Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Motion to approve 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48.
Second. Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Motion to approve 49, 50, 51, 52, and 53. Second.
Motion second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Motion to approve number 54, 55, 56, 57.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes.
Motion to approve 58.
Second. Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
59, I do have a question. Consideration to award supply contract number FY 24-095 to the following low bidders: Chemrite Chemicals, Buford, Texas; Brentag, Southwest Lancaster, Texas; Chemtrade Chemicals, Parsippany, New Jersey; Paladine Inc., Riceboro, Georgia; Univar Solutions USA Inc., Kent, Washington; Penco Inc., San Felipe, Texas; Hawkins Inc., Roseville, Minnesota, in an annual amount of up to $5,225,000 and a 2-year total of $10,450,000. Right. For the purchase of water and wastewater treatment chemicals for the Utilities Department. The term of this contract shall be for a period of 2 years, beginning as of the date of its execution, and is contingent upon availability of appropriated funds. This contract has 3 one-year extensions. All chemicals will be purchased on an as-needed basis. Funding is available in the Waterworks and Sewer Systems funds. And really, my only question is, when we were discussing about the chemical contract that was going to be funded through ARPA funds, is this separate from those ARPA funds, or is this inclusive of those ARPA funds?
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Angie Cantu, Utilities Operations Manager for the record.
This is nothing to do with ARPA. The ARPA is actually funding the Jefferson Water Treatment Header Project and the chlorine dioxide, totally separate projects. This is actually the chemicals that we use at the water plant and the sewer plant. So nothing to do with ARPA.
Okay, so it was because of the chemicals, but chlorine dioxide.
Chlorine dioxide is totally separate. This is actually the chemicals that they use to actually treat the water and, of course, in the sewer system.
And do we use $10 million or $5 million worth of chemicals yearly?
Well, what's happening right now is this contract is up for renewal a little bit earlier than it usually is because we actually run out of funds. And so we are increasing it a little bit more than what we probably need just to have that cushion so that we do not find ourselves where we are needing to buy chemicals and we don't have the funds, the contract amounts available. So on average, we use about 3.8 million at the water plant and we use about 800,000 in the sewer plant and 50,000 in wastewater collection. But this is giving us a little bit of a cushion so that if prices go up or we have to treat more water than usual, then we have the ability to have the contract available.
Are these chemicals sensitive to heat? Do you need to put in more of them if it's hotter?
If it's hotter, yes, you're gonna use more chemicals to treat the water.
Thank you.
Councilman Rangel, go ahead.
Sir, thank you. Ms. Cantu, one question, maybe it's subject or not, I'm just wondering. Was it, this Tuesday or Wednesday, this Thursday, TCQ, do you have any information of if TCQ was at the Jefferson plant?
Yes, they were.
And do we have any results, any information? Because I wasn't aware, I don't know, I'm just wondering. Do we have any presentation of how it went, if we're in compliance or?
Well, I think everything right now is in compliance. I think it went really well, but I could ask Mr. Garcia in the next staff meeting to bring something forward.
Thank you. Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Staff reports number 60. Anything to report from the auditor? Nothing to report from the auditor. Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 61. Status report from utilities.
We're gonna,
Nothing.
request the table that.
Motion to table.
Second.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 62, discussion with possible action on recommendations to initiate an amendment to the existing right-of-way ordinance 2024-0-128 for mitigation damages to underground fiber lines and any other matters incident thereto. How are you, sir?
Good.
Oh,
Thank you.
that's good.
Good evening, council, council members. Roland Lozano for the record. Your right-of-way manager. We have, I believe the presentation's here. Let me just bring it up. Can't find it. We're supposed to put it on here. Let me see. Well, we had, looked at some of what we could do, and I believe you guys have the presentation. But we basically looked at what we have, the ordinance, and, right now, the items we looked at was what is allowed, everything's allowed in the back of curb, basically, so not in paved areas, and so it kind of congests, where utilities can go in. So some of the things we looked at was like micro trenching, but that wasn't an item that we kind of, it felt like it provided a negative impact to our streets, so that was one of the options that we had looked at originally, and, it's not a feasible option right now because it provides a negative impact to our streets. Also, we looked at maybe allowing installations of poles for the Fiber optic lines could be placed aerial instead of underground, but that would require an amendment to our land development code. And, that would, whatever council wants, so that was another option we looked at, also requiring on new
Councilwoman Cigarro,
subdivision.
1 second, Mr. Lozano.
Go ahead.
I apologize. Could you kind of orient us to this discussion? So the right-of-way ordinance allows for what currently, and then the reason for
Okay.
the amendments?
Okay, so right now, the ordinance allows for installation of fiber optic lines underground behind the curb, not in the streets, right? So that's the only area that allows it, right? And so, as council had directed staff to look into what options could we look at to amend the ordinance, right? So we looked at allowing, again, micro trenching, which is in the actual asphalt trenching, and in meeting with other departments, this really kind of option was a negative impact to our streets infrastructure, so that option was really kind of put on, I guess, table, back burner, I could say. So another option we would look at would be to allow poles, which are not allowed in our land development code on subdivisions. So if you look at the newer subdivisions, even, you know, the areas that have been a while, you don't see a lot of poles. You know, not eastern and western, they do have poles, so you don't see the issues of hitting water lines in those areas because they're on the poles. So, another issue that we looked at is for new subdivisions is very different than existing, right? So, the recommended option that we're recommending to council would be to, have additional enforcement by amending the right-of-way ordinance to allow third-party inspections that are paid by contractors, right? So that's one of the areas that we're, recommending. So we're here to ask council, as far as a direction on, what we would want to do moving forward, right?
Mr. Lozano, do you have any recommendations as far as, obviously you said one will not function?
Well,
one's above ground?
right, well, what we didn't want would be the micro trenching. City of San Antonio did allow micro trenching in certain areas, and so we looked at, in speaking with City, San Antonio, what were the, issues, and a lot of it was, yeah, they're hitting not just water lines, but gas lines, and so,
Yes, sir, Mr. Valdez.
Mayor Pro Temp, this issue came about, based on, I think, one of your items, a while back.
Several of my items, not
Yeah,
just one,
and
right.
so we've been trying to figure out how to better allow the companies that are coming in doing the fiber optic, right, and working our right of way. One of the main issues is that we don't have enough inspectors. And so what we're trying to say, like, I know they come in and work on a Saturday. I think the construction company has to pay for an inspector, our approved inspector, to go out there and do the inspections, right? And so what we're saying is, if you allow us, we can also include them to do an inspection through an approved inspector from the city, either an employee or a third-party inspector that we approve, that we have the control and say-so over, but have them pay for it because of the additional work that they're doing. It's not allowed, I think, in the ordinance right now, and so we're asking if council would consider allowing it, putting it into the ordinance, so that we could amend it and bring it back, and so that would be a better way to have somebody out in the field looking at them, would alleviate, I think, a lot of the problems that we're having right now. So that's kind of what's on the table right now as an option for you to consider.
Councilwoman Cigarro?
So I guess because micro trenching and third-party inspections don't seem to be congruent. So you're suggesting third-party inspections as a way to mitigate damages for fiber optic companies who are laying down fiber optic lines?
Yes, what happens is that with the micro trenching, the integrity of the street is
Right, and I don't
compromised,
mean to
right?
suggest that I'm supporting microtrenching. I'm
No,
just
no, no.
trying to figure out how we got from microtrenching to third-party inspections.
But what was happening, we're looking at different options of how it would work or it works in other cities, and that was one of the options that, Mr. Lozano had seen.
So,
Yes.
so micro trenching was because it's in the asphalt and not where it's congested, right? So you're looking at not placing it where it's already congested, and we may or may not know everything that's there. So that was one of the options that other cities have done, right? And so, but when we looked at it and talking to staff, it's like it would provide a negative impact to us.
So
So that
this-
option is not recommended.
So the
right now.
suggestion for the third-party inspectors is that they'll be able to better manage where existing utilities are.
Correct.
And hopefully prevent these companies
What
from.
we've noticed is that we don't have someone watching. They just go right through and, we'll figure it out later. And they destroy or damage, utilities, and we don't want that, right?
Right.
And so we have somebody inspecting that they're paying for, it'd be a lot better. And so that's what we're recommending.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Mr. Lozano.
Well, I was just gonna go over what the current procedures are, right? So, and I guess I should, go there, but yeah, they do have to have a permit from a registered contractor. They do have to, every, damage, they are responsible to repair. And, it's just an enforcement type issue, what is being hit. They do need to, verify what is existing prior to starting construction via hydro excavating or by hand, exposing what the existing infrastructure is there as they go. So I just wanted to say that there's a misconception sometimes that they're not paying for damages. No, they are required to, as by our current ordinance. So in talking to staff, so it was, like I said, recommended for more enforcement of it. So as Mr. Valdez is pointing out, that the lack of city inspectors for that.
Right, that sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Lozano. No, yeah, we've had plenty of complaints specifically in my district, Hillside area, Lakeside area, Regency, JSJ, where these people are coming in, these fiber optic companies are coming in and just tearing up our lines, our utilities, fiber optic lines, water lines, gas lines even. So those are huge issues and they're concerns to our citizens, and we need to be sure and address that. So my motion will be to accept the recommendation from staff.
Mayor,
Yes,
Pro Tem,
Mr.
may I just add one other thing? Could you amend that to also allow us to look at increasing the fees of these breaks? Because I understand about the enforcement or the inspection of that and everything, but I believe that some of them feel it is easier to
Cost of doing business.
Right.
and fix the issue.
I'll
And in
accept
my
the amendment.
mind, I
Yes,
think
sir.
I think that was where that conversation was with the council, was to enact a little bit on top of that for what our structure is.
As amended. Motion is second, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Number, yes, sir.
would we be able to motion on, recessing and convene as a Laredo Mass Transit Board? Before going to executive session, I know Mr. Achar is here.
Absolutely. Motion second, all in favor? Any opposed? 63 also for, well, they're asking to go to. Right. We're gonna leave that one pending. We'll leave that one pending. Okay. So we're gonna motion to recess the Laredo City Council and convene as the Laredo Mass Transit Board. Motion the second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Motion to approve number 66, 67, 68, and 69, and 70.
Second.
Mr. Achar, would you like to speak? Get to the podium? Or you're okay us approving it?
Yeah.
We've got a motion, a second, all in favor. Any opposed? Yes, ma'am, go ahead. Number 68. We've approved all the way to 70.
Oh, okay.
Yes, ma'am. Number 68, yes, ma'am.
Hello, Mr. Epps, I just wanted to ask about, if you could explain a little bit about so authorizing the city manager to execute the renewable natural gas supply offer contract with Clean Energy Renewable Fuels LLC for the clean fuel production tax credit. Tax credit is equal to the product of the applicable amount per gallon or gallon equivalent for any transportation fuel that is produced by El Metro at a quality facility during the year, and the emission factor for such fuels determined under the code. El Metro is producing fuel?
No,
Okay, what,
Let me- let
I'm
me-
reading something wrong,
yeah, let
obviously.
me explain. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council, RJ Gatsa, Director of Transit. The Renewable Fuel Standard is a national program that focuses on reducing the dependence on foreign oils. Okay, we currently have a fossil fuel combined with the CNG that we currently use. By doing this, it'll remove that, okay, and relieve us from the dependent on foreign oils, right? This is a tax incentive credit that's offered to all CNG agencies throughout the nation. We are wanting to take advantage of this opportunity. We currently, with the volume that we consume, not produce, but consume, is approximately 250,000 gross gallon equivalent, GGEs. And with this program, we would, an approximate credit of $54,000 annually based on our consumption right now. As we increase the volume, that credit will be increasing in the near future, hopefully next year when we receive those other 19 units. So that's what we're asking for you to approve this contract, so we can have a tax credit of approximately $54,000 annually.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Got a motion, a second, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. We can go back to number 63, please.
Well, we should adjourn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Correction. Motion to adjourn as the Laredo Mass Transit Board and reconvene as the Laredo City Council. Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Number 63, please.
Good evening. We're requesting direction from council on a proposed ordinance amendment regarding the removal of the lot depth requirement for our R1B zoning districts. The R1B zone was created in 2015. It was approved through ordinance 2015-0126. It created the R1B zoning district, so it's a relatively new zone. The purpose of the R1B is to provide for residential uses, and those uses normally considered as an integral part of the residential neighborhood. NAZER provides for subdivision of single-family residential lots with a minimum of 3,000 square foot lots. So it's our smallest residential lots or zoning district. Let's see, it was previously amended in March 2022. That it was to allow for properties in Eastern and Western. Previously, the R1B was limited to only new subdivisions, so outside of Eastern and Western. So this latest ordinance amendment allows for R1B zoning in our Eastern and Western. And it also adjusted the minimum lot width from 35 to 34 within the Eastern and Western districts. So the current lot dimensions for the R1B zone is a width of 35 or 34 within Eastern and Western, and here's that lot depth, 85 foot, right? With a minimum lot area of 3,000 square feet. So the proposed amendment, if you give us that direction, would be to remove that 85-foot lot depth. It would maintain the lot area and the width. So it would affect properties both in Eastern and Western as well as the new subdivisions. And the reason why we're pursuing this is to allow easier subdivision of those typical R1 zone lots in Eastern and Western. So you would have, and I'll have a little diagram a little bit later on. So you have Eastern and Western, you typically have 6,000 square foot lots. And it would allow for rezoning to those R1B, and it would allow subdivision of those lots into two lots. So it has the potential to create more vital inner city, create more density, and allow more infill development. So you see here, this is the lot that I was talking about earlier. You have your typical R1 zone lot. You see that's 46 feet wide with 6,000 square foot. And if there was a rezone and it would be allowed to not have that depth requirement, you would be allowed to subdivide to have these two lots, where you would only be allowed to have this one lot prior.
Ms. Guerra,
One there.
excuse the interruption. So there would be no requirement as far as the 85 feet in depth
That's correct.
anymore? There'd be no requirement at all?
No.
As long as it meets a 3,000 square foot requirement?
Yes.
There are some
And,
zoning designations that don't have a requirement.
It is not the only one that is that way. There are other zones that is the same way, that has the lot area requirement and the width, but no lot depth requirement.
Is there a setback to the home in particular in these lots?
Yes, it's,
How many feet is that from the
I
curb?
wanna say it's 20 feet. Let me see if I have it here.
So on a 3,000 square foot lot, the 1,200 square foot home or 1,500 square foot home with less than 20 feet from the
In the
curb in front, what would be
R1B,
left in the back?
front yard setback is 20.
So essentially no backyard for these homes?
That's correct. In the rear yard setbacks are 6.
6 feet?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Hierro.
Ms. Guerra, if there is a subdivision as your model showed, is there a permanent easement given to that back lot so that it doesn't become isolated?
No, typically, this would occur on corner lots, so this lot would be the front lot, and this lot would be on the side, like.
So this could not exist in the middle of a block?
No, it wouldn't work in the middle.
Thank you.
But it'd be a great option for those on the corners.
Yes, Ms. Bettis, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge the fact that, you know, this is your first council meeting as the director, and you're already bringing us proposals for amendments, which is something that I think is commendable, because this is what we, you know, rely on your expertise and of the departments to tell us what needs to be changed within our ordinances. And if this is gonna help bring more housing to some of these older neighborhoods, then I think it's a good idea, and I commend you for bringing it forward without.
Well, I guess two things. I wish I could say it was my idea, but we're listening to, you know, the public and different stakeholders, and they're bringing these ideas to us, and we thought it was a good
Well,
to
usually
bring it forward.
that's what we do sometimes, but it's good to see it coming from you guys as well too.
Absolutely.
With that, I guess we would just, hopefully we could get a motion to direct staff to develop a proposed amendment.
Got a motion, do we have a second? Second. Motion second, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guerra, appreciate it.
Executive.
Executive session. You want to go to motion?
I'll move to go to executive session, a request for executive session under Texas Government Code 55.1.0711A to discuss pending or contemplated litigation concerning the Columbia Solidarity Bridge expansion and the related presidential permits,
Got a motion?
and authorize the city attorney and any other departments that city management feels are necessary to present this item.
Motion second, all in favor?
Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
I'm sorry, yes, sir, go ahead.
Well, I think my item has some elements of it that we qualify also.
For 70 Delta 2 pursuant to Texas Government Code 551072 for deliberation regarding real property.
Accept the amendment?
Yes.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Executive session as of 9:15.
Regular session, 9:54 PM. Back in executive session.
Mr. Mayor, for purpose of the record, no votes were cast and no decisions were made. I'd like to make a motion to authorize staff to authorize the city manager and the city attorney to proceed as they see in the best interest of the city for item number 65.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
Mr. Mayor, for item 70D2, which was also an executive session item, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city manager and legal, including staff, to sign any and all relevant documents to proceed in any preliminary stage in the best interest of the city.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
Are we in council items? I'll make a motion to extend the meeting till 11 if needed.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
Item number 70B1, discussion with possible action to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Webb County Heritage Foundation that would authorize them to place benches in San Agustin Plaza and any other matters incident thereto, co-sponsored by Councilmember Elisa Sierra. So I'm bringing this item forward. Oh my God, you've been waiting all this time. I'm so sorry. Perhaps you could give us just a little bit of discussion why this item is coming forward now and the history of the benches in San Agustin Plaza.
Of course. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Andrea Ordóñez, and I'm here representing the Webb County Heritage Foundation. This is Eduardo Garcia. He's also here representing the Webb County Heritage Foundation. Over 27 years ago, the Webb County Heritage Foundation came into an agreement with the City of Laredo where the foundation purchased some benches for San Agustin Plaza. These benches came at no cost to the city, but the city allowed us to raise funds by selling these benches and putting them in the plaza. These benches were cast from the original benches that once adorned San Agustin. So what we want is 27 years have passed, and we want to come to an understanding of possibly replacing some of these benches that have been deemed unusable or unsalvageable by the Parks Department of the city. And the foundation is committed to replacing these benches and also to maintaining the lettering on the benches that exist now. And of course, the ownership would remain within the city, but we would replace the benches and continue to raise funds for them. And what we want with this collaboration is to continue to preserve the historic integrity of San Agustin Plaza.
Mayor, ma'am?
Go ahead.
So I just want to note that there was an unsafe bench that was recently removed, and the Parks Department did contact Webb County Heritage Foundation, and they took care of the removal, and they are preparing now for a new bench to be placed there. And again, just emphasizing the fact that these are benches that match the original benches, so they're historically accurate. They maintain the integrity of the historical value of San Agustin Plaza.
That's correct.
And this is a way to formalize what has been a verbal agreement for 27 years, but for the next generation, so that there's some institutional memory, we would like to formalize that in an MOU. So I'd like to move that we move forward with this.
Second that motion.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Next item?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Got my, yeah.
Yeah, that's yours.
Okay, we have 70C1, so this is a discussion with possible action to use District 6 park improvement fees not to exceed $200,000 for design and construction of 6 new pickleball courts and a new parking lot at Divine Mercy Park as planned and initiated by Parks and Engineering. So this is not to say that the 6 courts and the parking lot will only cost $200,000. This is just the amount that of park improvement fees that will be designed for it. Originally, this was ideally going to be included in our capital improvement budget this year. But because of other circumstances, we funded the ADA Playground Phase 2, which I'm very grateful for, the expansion. So we had to find a different way to fund these pickleball courts. So I'm trying to tag this money there, and then anything left over we'll use District 6 priority funds for. And I have Mr. Coach Gomez to kind of explain.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. J.J. Gomez, Parks Director for the record. In front, you see the proposed design that we want to do with the pickleball courts at Divine Mercy. We have 4 pickleball courts at Lafayette, and they are a big hit. There's not enough. We're just always packed. This weekend, they sent me some pictures that it's always, there's not enough. We should have built some more, and we're going to do some more. So I know, and we want to spread them out throughout town. We want to put them here at Divine Mercy because we have the land there. It's flat. I know it's a busy area, but also it's also going to help with these. I think there's 40 parking spaces there to help alleviate the parking problems there at Divine Mercy because there's always a lot of people there. But one of the bigger parks has always been used like other parks as well. So again, like Dr. King said, this cost is going to be around $350,000. We do have $200,000 of park improvement fees that are going to be allocated from there that we have right now. And then whatever the balance is, I think Dr. King said we tap into that to finish this project. So yes, so that these 6 courts will can help tremendously, and hopefully we want to build. There's more to come in Central Laredo, South Laredo, and throughout the city. So
Yes, and just so I did ask if there are any other places in District 6 that made sense. This is the one they came up with. It, like you mentioned, how flat it was, and also, I personally didn't want to just because we needed parking here anyway. As you can see, Diamond Drive there, people park there when they're not supposed to, and the residents there just can't stand it. We do have the MOU with the church for when they're not in services, but when they are, that is an issue. And if you also look east, the church owns the property east there, east of the walking trail there. They're interested in doing like an overflow parking with like recycled gravel bits, mills, to be able to help with the overflow as well, so that we can prevent the dangerous parking that happens along there. So excited for this. Thank you very much. We killed, shouldn't say kill, 2 birds with 1 stone. Let's do a better metaphor. Okay, but we get the parking and the quality of life courts. And
that's your motion?
That's my motion, everybody. There we go.
Motion, second.
I'm
All
trying
in
to get out
favor?
here by 11. I know.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Coach. Yeah, so 70C2, this is just a request to refer this possible consideration for a mural. So the North Rim baseball fields south of Loop 20, west of International, a lot of baseball going on there. But if you're driving on Loop 20, you can see the fields and you can see the back wall, the back concrete wall there from Loop 20. It doesn't look very doesn't look great from Loop 20 as you're driving by. North Central Park already has a lot of great art. This would be an addition to that. I'm not suggesting that I don't want to step on the Fine Arts and Culture Commission's toes. I'm just asking that we send it to them, refer it to them for consideration, and if they see that it would be appropriate, then they would bring it back to us. That's the motion.
Second.
Motion, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, next item.
We have 70D1. Did we discuss that one already?
Oh, that's it? Yeah. Merson?
That's it.
Second.
Motion to adjourn, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Meeting adjourned.